2008 was a stacked year for fighting games, with critical releases such as BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, Guilty Gear XX Atom Core Plus, Mortal Kombat vs. DCU, Soul Calibur 4, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, hell, this game sequel was out, and of course biggest of all being Street Fighter 4, freeing everyone from the so-called dark age that fighting games were supposed to be going through at that time. But what do all these games have in common? They cost money, and some were out on the newest consoles at the time, the PS3 and Xbox 360, so you had to make do with what you had, and for us, that was a hacked PS2, 2 controllers, and a Japanese copy of today's game. This is Team Crossbody, and this is Arcana Heart's RUNBACK. The Arcana Heart series is made by Yuki Enterprise, a company that was founded in 2000 and was comprised of former SNK and Samsho staff, with their first game as a newly formed group being probably the best entry of the Samurai Shodown series to date, Samurai Shodown 5 and 5 Special. In 2006, Yuki rebranded into Exumu Incorporated, where they made the Arcana Heart series with a sequel, Arcana Heart 2, being the first game to be published and developed under Exumu completely, with Arcana Heart 1 being made by members of Yuki Enterprise, although Exumu did handle the full console developments. At the end of February 2020, Exumu ended their business operations and any ongoing projects have been migrated to their rebranded successor, Team Arcana, where they continue to update Arcana Heart 3 while managing other projects to this day. So I guess we'll wait for the next rebranding. Now with that little bit of history summed up, we can get into the game proper with the The main story is simple. The villain does something bad and the good guys have to stop them. Mildred, the villain in question, was to make a new and better world by combining the two dimensions, the normal and elemental. But who's gonna stop her? The police? The military? No. The world's fate is in the hands of the Maidens, a group of schoolgirls who wield the power of the arcane, obviously. The mole itself takes place over 8 days on a world map. Between days 1, 2, 4, and 5, it's the player's choice on who you'll fight. Once selected, there will be a small exchange between opponents before the match starts. Don't go looking for any deeper reasons. Most pre-fight dialogue is disturbingly non-threatening.
Okay, Debbie, forget about Hesh.
Okay.
I've got something for you.
What is it?
A book.
What's the book?
A modest proposal.
By whom?
Jonathan Swift.
And what is the book about?
During the 3rd and 6th day, you'll have to fight a rival character, which tends to have more involved dialogue, but is still on the non-threatening side. With 2 days remaining, a floating palace will appear from the sky. Once selected, you have to deal with Fiona before confronting Mildred herself. The final fight is set above Tokyo, where Mildred will transform into a cocoon thing that you have to take down. Winning this will prevent Mildred's Archangel form from having a maxed out special meter, which makes this tough boss fight a bit easier, as she uses all of her Arcana special attacks along with the supers, which require no meter. However, she can spend her meter on a screen freezing super attack of her own that deals a good chunk of damage. A good tactic is spamming lows, since her attacks are mostly highs or have good deal startup. After beating Mildred, the castle will disappear, and a selected character will resolve their issues. You'll be rewarded with a special piece of artwork with a staff roll in the story mode. So 2000s fighting game standard. While the soundtrack is certainly no Guilty Gear, it does its job well, and in our humble opinion has some certified bangers. The music has this mystical feeling to it that really fits the vibe the game is going for. It sounds mystical and feminine, which makes sense given the large amount of estrogen in the cast. Each song will have a focus on a particular instrument, with tracks featuring the piano being a standout for us. It feels like something is always happening and or escalating, which is perfectly fine for fighting game music. The themes being catchy also helps. While not everyone's cup of tea, I wouldn't call any of the music here bad. Here's a couple of snippets of the OST so you can hear it for yourself. The game is a sprite-based fighter, which was more frequent when this game was released. The character sprites are very detailed, full of expression, and animate decently, though they can be a tad stiff at times. As for the character designs, they aren't world-shaking, but you'll definitely remember the ones you'll like, from Lilika's rollerblades, Kara's slime thing, Konoha's Strider scarf, all the way down to Heart's ribbon. I believe there's something for everyone. The game's art style is moe, which puts more of a focus on rounded shapes and big eyes with small noses that allow maximum expression for mouths. Emphasis on cuteness rather coolness. It's certainly not the hypest art style for a fighting game. With hover design choices, I can see how some can be bothered by them, but as long as you don't take it too seriously, it's inoffensive. Just make sure your dad doesn't walk into the room while you're playing.
Are you winning, son? Politics instead of gameplay! Ruin return characters! We ruin our music! Oh yeah!
Backdrops are simple, but feature a good amount of detail, except for that stage. The one in the middle, yeah, that one. They all have alternate features during Arcana Blaze. I'm assuming they depict different areas of Tokyo, but I haven't been so I wouldn't know. The backgrounds fit the character we're paired with. Heart is the school, Saki is the rooftop since she's cool, Lilika is the radar tower since she can fly, Mei Fang is the shiny stage because she has a hyphen in her name, and Mari is that empty ass stage from before. Okay, it's a shrine. What we have on this front is standard. Your Magic series, air dashing, and super meter are all present. But don't get it twisted. This game does bring things to the table. Like homing dashing. Clashing. Homing cancel. Back guard cancel. Forward guard cancel. Similar to Gear to Gear's Burst, Arcana Force activates passive abilities and restores any missing home engage at the cost of turning your remaining super meter into a timer. While the clock is ticking, you're able to use a unique super attack called Arcana Blaze for massive damage, although most aren't dependable. That timer is better used for maintaining those special passives. The Lightning Arcana gains access to semi-tracking projectiles, though clashing is more important. You can clash by dashing or charging C's. Input another command while clashing and you'll get a counterattack. The Love Arcana focuses around the use of projectiles in the form of slow-moving love-packed balls or fast thirst beams, while stopping and returning ones coming your way, with the added ability of being able to slow down your jumping arc after a double jump. Basic zoom move. They clearly love zooming. The Wind Arcana specializes on movement and speed. The additional air dash and jump allow for far more mobility than other Arcanas. It also has a push block and a quick drop, as well as sonic booms that chase you like hurricanes, and a tornado hold that launches if the opponent steps in it. The Fire Arcana increases your killing power, but that's not all. Your chargeable C attacks become unblockables. You gain the use of angled fireballs that you can use in combos, as well as a chargeable flamethrower. The Flamethrower Super does a ton of damage on top of the crap ton of damage you'll be already doing, and with a fast, short-range burst super is one of the safest, most well-balanced Arcana picks in the game. Here's another mechanic that we want to put a bit more of a focus on, the recovery system or teching, which works quite differently in this game. When you press the D button while being smashed towards the ground or the wall, you can use a bar of home engage to regain control, allowing your character to snap back into action. The benefits of this being able to disrupt mistimed combos or to prevent follower pressure are Oki. This adds a great deal of decision making because not only does home engage allow you to recover from bad situations, as well as being your answer to escape pressure through the use of forward and back guard cancels, but it's also your main source of damage with the use of homing cancel. Do you explode and risk it all on a powerful combo? Or do you stop the opponent's momentum for far less damage in return? Poor management of the homing gauge can really cripple a player. This way of handling the recovery system is a really smart design. Just in case it isn't obvious, Arcana Heart has a full female roster of characters that's a play on different anime tropes. Different styles of characters can be found here, from well-rounders, rekkas, grapplers, even a puppet fighter, so finding a character shouldn't be an issue. Adding to the diversity are Arcanas that give the girls tools they might not have normally. A good idea could be giving the slow grappler Kara a way to shoot and defend against projectiles with love. Maybe get around the screen faster with wind, or the Fire Arcana. You could give a puppet character like Lysolette a powerful command grab with the ability to tank hits with the Water Arcana, or maybe armored dashes with Earth, or just give her fire. A zoner like Maori can really benefit from the Poison Arcana. It can give her dot damage traps, fast teleports, the ability to create holes that trap opponents, making her far harder to hit, and give people a real reason to cry about zoners. Or you can give her fire. No, seriously, the Fire Arcana seems like the best one in terms of balance. But I want to be a Metatard. I got you. Poison, Tom, and Darkness are the most broken Arcanas in the game. Poison allows you powerful loops. Time can be used for infinites, and Darkness has some of the best Uki setups in the game. These three Arcanas, in combination with any of the girls, will probably make them strong. Except for Fiona. Okay, maybe with the Time Arcana. We here at Team Crossbody have a deep love for this game. It's one of the first games we actually started to play competitively and was our first introduction to anime fighters. When our friend brought this to us way back when, he consistently beat our asses till we learned how it worked. Yup, there were no shortcuts back then, and that was okay because Arcana Heart was a fun game to play. With its focus on variety, replayability, aerial combat, and simple controls paired with strong core mechanics, we had a surprisingly smooth time relearning this game for the video. Our muscle memory may be with later games in the franchise, but our hearts will always belong to this one. "2001 was a rough time, for obvious reasons. For consoles, we were a year in being blasted by the goated PS2. Nintendo just dropped the Advance and GameCube, while Microsoft threw the hat in the ring with the OG Xbox. We got classics like GTA 3, Metal Gear Solid 2, and Halo, even fighting games we eat, and with the release of Super Smash Bros. Melee and SNK vs. Capcom 2. But our story lies with a plucky little franchise that just had a new release, and though it came out a year earlier, we didn't get it till this time. This is Team Crossbody, and this is Bloody Roar 3's RUNBACK.
Bloody Roar 3.
Bloody Roar 3 was made by Japanese development team Aiding, or what they formerly called Raising, for those who remember playing the original Bloody Roar, or at least from those demo discs Sony used to give out. The development team was formed from former staff of Kombat, where they made arcade games, with their debut game being a vertical scroller shooter, 1993's Scorer Striker. Aiding at the beginning was mostly known for their shoot 'em ups, but I'm sure most people know them for their fighting games, especially their license affairs, some of which are some really high profile releases that are played to this day. Of course you have the Bloody Roar series, but they also developed several Kamen Rider games, the certified hood classic Fate Stay Unlimited codes, the best Naruto fighter to date, Clash of Ninja 4, the criminally underrated and banished to Nintendo consoles Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and the very loved Marvel vs. Capcom 3, with their latest release being 2022's Drop Bag DNF Duel, the game that had several trailers for a character yet to be given a release date at the time of this video's making. Let's have a quick rundown of the Bloody Roar series as a whole. This is a series of 3D fighting games along the lines of others before it, such as Tekken, Dead or Alive, Soul Calibur, and Virtua Fighter, but it has way more in common with Fighting Vipers than any of those other games in my opinion. The first game in the series started in 1997 with Bloody Roar, or the totally stupid sounding North American arcade version named Beasterizers. It's Beast Wars and Beasties all over again. The first entry sparked enough positive praise to have Aiding follow up with 1998's Bloody Roar 2, Bringer of the New Age. That's the name for Japan and Europe. My fellow flag wavers got the subtitle, The New Breed, when the game hit States in 1999, which makes it sound far more like a WWF Attitude Era faction than the sequel to Bloody Roar. But naming aside, it gathered more positive praise among fans, with some calling it the best entry in the series. The series hit its cultural peak between Bloody Roar 2 and the newly released 2001's Bloody Roar 3, when I heard some equally nerdy kids talking about one of these games regularly at my school. The series was mentioned in 2000 during the song My Console by the Italian Euro dance group Eiffel 65.
Take a thread, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, Gran Turismo, Omega Boost, Bloody Raw, X-Files, all over the world, come on, Red.
And they even had a 2-volume manga run in 2001 that was published in the monthly Shonen Jump. So while certainly not as huge or well known as some of the heavy hitters in the 3D fighter space, Bloody Roar was starting to carve his own niche in the scene that at this point in time was shaping up to be the
Wave of the future!
That's right, honey.
But like it was cursed with his own personal B sign, all that momentum suddenly stopped. And while aiding soldiered on with 2000 and 2003's Bloody Roar Primal Fury and Extreme for GameCube and Xbox respectively, the series never seemed to recover that little niche it had in the public eye. It came crashing to a head with Bloody Roar's triumphant return to the Sony PlayStation. Primal Fury and Extreme were never released on the PS2, by the way. With 2003's Curious Case of Head Smash, Bloody Roar 4, and the series has seemed to be on ice ever since.
Story mode centers around the zoanthropes, people with the ability to transform into half-human, half-animal hybrids, and their run-ins with underground organizations that want to use them as weapons, out-of-control hate groups of their own kind, and the world at large, to eventually silly things like magic tabulas and death mark tattoos. Arcade in both execution and story being told is disappointing to say the least. While similar to Bloody Roar 2 in presentation, with the stills explaining the scenes being shown, there's a lot less in the third entry. And while you could argue the fact that story mode in Bloody Roar 2 wasn't all that interesting, at least they tried to give the characters a bit of personality and frame the fights behind something more than just this guy's between you and beating the game. Now as for the story itself, they decided to include magic into the series through the element of these B signs in the tabula. Okay, I get it. Bloody Roar is essentially X-Men with were-animals, but it's cool. Everything about the story was heavily science-based up to this point, that all of a sudden, bam, now magic is involved. Magic that is so shoehorned into the series that now, not even God knows. But if we're just ignoring these elements, nothing really happened to each story being told here, so we'll just only cover a couple. Hugo becomes the leader of the WOC, a group that strives to build a bright future for humans and zoanthropes. He noticed the beast sign on his body and discovers that it'll eventually kill him as well as others afflicted, so he goes to stop it. He finds and defeats Xeon and just punches the tabula that stopped all beast signs from appearing. And that's it. Gato's a commissioner in the United Nations, so of course he'll want to bring peace. He's highly respected for his inspiring words, so maybe he's like the MLK for zoanthropes. Anyway, he gets the mark on his body, and knowing what that means, wants to leave behind something for the next generation for both races. At the end, he fights off the evil energies of the tabula, and that's enough apparently. He takes the tabula away to be studied, and ponders if more of them could be out there. Sheena's story is strange. She gets the mark and then joins a coalition to find the source of the beast marks. She's then contacted by her supervisors who are in a helicopter. They inform her that they want the tabula, but Sheena says no and just pimps off because she doesn't want anyone controlling the artifact that powerful. She then retires, and the next time she's seen, she's with her boyfriend on the beach. So, did she do anything to the tabula? Does she still have the beast mark? Did she make peace with the fact that she's going to die? Is she just hoping the situation fixes itself? Let's move on. Stun might have the best story in the game because things actually do happen. After the events of Bloody Roar 2, Stun went into hiding because he is forced to drink blood to stabilize his rapidly decaying body. When the beast mark appears, The powers he gained from it overloaded his instability, causing sharp pains and making him lose control. He discovered that the pain is caused through our resultant throats, marked with the sign, and if they weren't beaten, he'd completely lose all reason. He eventually finds the tabula. When he goes to destroy it, the tabula speaks to him, overwhelming him with the power and telling him how truly alike they are. Unable to resist, he becomes infused with the evil energies and becomes a monster, and now prepares to plunge the world into darkness. There are some other character stories that are mildly interesting, but nothing get as good as Stuns. The overall plot with this magical nonsense was not needed for the Bloody Roar series. I get if they would have did something interesting with the concept, but they don't. Characters get the beast mark, then destroy the tabula in some way. Yuriko's literal involvement in the story is because she wanted to see how her friends were doing. Bloody Roar 3 story just sucks.
This might be complete bias here, but we feel Bloody Roar 3 still looks really good even today. I don't know what it is about PS2 models, but some really don't have an issue holding up. If I would have to narrow it down to something, my guess would be the strange in-between from something that looks like a human, but not really there just yet. Bloody Roar 3 is no exception, but these models look really good. I feel Bloody Roar 3's models look better than the sequels, but I could be overreaching with that particular take. At any rate, these graphics blew our minds when we were younger, and if the game were to come out today, the improved resolution provided would really do the game justice without even having to change very much. The transformations, on the other hand, are hit and miss. The characters with fur, Hugo, Gato, and Alice, didn't age all too well, but mostly everyone else looks good. There are two beast forms I like to cover here, and there, in our opinion, are the two overall worst looking beast forms in the game. Alice here is a pretty cool looking character, right? But her beast form is just, what is that? I know it says the rabbit, but that's not what a rabbit looks like. It looks more like she ran off screen to put on a fursuit. She's all standing upright and has a neck. Her legs are gross and I don't know what happened here. At least they fix her in the sequel game. Jenny, on the other hand, is much more egregious and will forever be bad. She's the bat. But look at her. Does that look like a bat to you? It's the Alice situation times 1,000, but at the very least Alice has fur and stuff. Jenny isn't even trying. She's a bad cosplayer. And not that her costume is bad, but she's the kind of cosplayer that wears a costume and just exposes her tits and say, look, I'm the character, convinced? Ideally, she should have one of the coolest looking beast modes in the game, and one of the scarier ones at fact, to just oppose the beauty of the human form. It's all there. Jenny as a character could have hated transforming because it makes her look ugly, adding something more to the character other than small mouth McBoring Spot. She could have been cool, but instead we get boring Coomerbait. Disrespectful. I wouldn't be going so hard if she wasn't plastered on the front cover like a main character when she has little to no impact on the main plot, when more important characters are shrunk below her. It's like the Kirby thing, but with sex appeal. And it keeps happening. Each character has 3 costumes available to them. One recolored to their primary outfit and another alternate. Most of them are nice and some are slightly redesigned primaries, but I'm not going to complain when it's free. It was nice to get these things for free back in the day, wasn't it? The arenas aren't anything to write home about. They all look the part and have enough window dressing for you to identify where you are. The underground sewers and city slum stages even have interactable elements to them. The art used in story mode are super well illustrated, which just bums us out more that there's little to no art in this game compared to Bloody Roar 2.
I don't know what the fandom's overall opinion is of Bloody Roar 3's music, but I vaguely remember people saying 2's is the best in the series, and while I would never call anything in that soundtrack bad, I do think it's a tad boring. I consider myself a rock and metal fan of all kinds, and I'm no musical expert, but Bloody Roar 2 music all sounds the same. It's like they all carry the same energy to them. The tracks of this game avoid that by associating the themes with the arenas instead of the characters, will give the music more of a chance to mix things up. From the adventurous atmosphere of the mysterious relic stage. The meditative riffs of the Silent Temple stage. The dangerous aura of the underground sewers. The sense of urgency and intensity of the Sea Fortress stage. Utter finality of a Beast Legacy stage. So instead of the heavy instrumental rock of the second game, the third one has several genres tossed in there, and that circumvent any issues of fatigue I have the Bloody Roar 2 offerings. There's just a lot more to listen to here, and that makes Bloody Roar 3 the strongest soundtrack in the series in my opinion. Also, Dino Museum.
For the time-honored tradition of sticking something to the wall and seeing what stays, we're going to be presenting the mechanics section a little differently this time. We'll be showing one or two matches and trying to explain the systems of the game while the match is going on. This game, well, the entire Bloody Roar series as a whole, was always criticized for being a button masher, which was a title any fighting game that wasn't Tekken, Soul Calibur, or Virtua Fighter gained just by existing. And yes, while Bloody Roar is a simple enough game to hop onto and start mashing, the unique mix of mechanics the game possesses adds far more depth the series has any right to be. We'll try our best to cover several of its more important ones. Bloody Roar 3 sports a super control system of punch, kick, guard, 2 sidestepping buttons, and a special for transforming and using beast attacks. Each of its characters have a list of attack strings similar to other 3D fighters, and has several unique attacks that they can pull off by doing standard motions such as quarter circle forward or back down forward. Nothing is too complex here, and you can pretty much mash to figure out most of your character's move list, or at least find some useful strings to build some kind of game plan off of. Although why there is no command list to be seen is strange.
The entire gimmick of the game is people turning into animals. How? By filling up your beast gauge while attacking, being attacked, or other actions such as evading. Once the game prompts you, press the B button and you'll transform. Doing so comes with tons of advantages. The character damage increases while receiving less damage. They gain new attacks with the beast button. Allow access to beast drive attacks. The character becomes heavier and harder to juggle. Can jump higher without running first and can wall jump. Attacks gain new cancel points and other properties, and blue life regeneration. Now hold up, there's more to the beast gauge. Once your character is transformed, the gauge will act like an additional health bar. The more damage you take, the lower it gets, and once it's low enough, any hard hitting attack, sweep attack, throw, or being put in the juggle state will revert you back to human. This creates a game flow more about managing your beast gauge and form while keeping the opponent out of theirs. Believe me, you want a human v human or a beast v beast matchup, because if you manage to get in a human v beast situation, it's an uphill battle. As stated before, beasts gain attack, defense, speed, and passive blue life regen. They can easily body a non-transformed character in a single combo, taking up to 50% off a single exchange to 100% off the right read. So while in this situation, it might be better to play defensively, ship them down. Doing so can literally mean the difference between life and death. While in beast form, inputting double quarter circle forward or back will allow your character to perform a super attack called a beast drive. Doing so will allow you to do massive damage to the opponent if it lands, at the cost of losing your remaining beast gauge and reverting you back to human form when executed. The more beast gauge the character has at the time of the beast drive, the more damage you'll do. Every character has at least 2 beast drives. Some, such as Yuriko, has multiple depending on how it lands. Using a beast drive also recovers a small portion of blue health equal to the amount of beast gauge available when it was used. Now, I don't know why anyone would use this technique, but the game has a combat mechanic called Hyper Beast Mode. By pressing guard and the beast drive button, the character will get all flashy and the beast gauge become a timer, protecting it from attacks. In this mode, the player is allowed to do as many beast drives as they wish, along with increased speed when attacking. Afterwards, the player will not be able to go back into beast mode for the remainder of the match. Winning a match is not that damn important that you'll risk being at that type of disadvantage in this game, at least competitively. We more or less broad stroke the more important system mechanics that the game had to offer. We'd be here all day if we bother going into deeper detail about it. Bloody Roar 3 is a strange cocktail of systems that make the game really unique, and it wasn't really appreciated at the time of release. Surprisingly, this game and its more polished sequel, Primal Fury, are still played by a small community of fans today, and even appears in modern gaming tournaments such as Combo Breaker 2023, thanks to passionate fans such as Jeremiah Isaiah and others. Also, by chance any of this interested you, we recommend Hyper Beast TV, a YouTube channel dedicated to Bloody Roar matches, played at a much higher level than what you saw here with us.
We played the hell out of the first Bloody Roar through one of the demo discs Sony used to give out, but never owned it, and missed out on Bloody Roar 2 entirely. So by the time we reunited with the series with finding and picking up Bloody Roar 3 at a GameStop sales pile, the series might have been already hitting the wall with Bloody Roar 4. I don't remember. What I do remember are countless matches with my brother and friends, and discovering just how surprisingly deep the game is as I got more into the fighting game genre as a whole. Even after we put it down and moved on, some part of us always thought of this series every now and again. But even if we did forget, we had awesome videos such as SCXCR's Bloody Roar Retrospective reminding us of it. I would personally recommend those series of videos. It's from a time when YouTube used to be cool, and they're very informative, and I'm proud that our little crappy video got to contribute to that little discussion, even if a bit. See you next time on the RUNBACK. It's 1997, and America is in the middle of the second term of the Clinton years. Many significant films were also released during this time, such as Good Will Hunting, LA Confidential, The Fifth Element, Princess Mononoke, and Titanic. And much like his media cousin, gaming in general also had a fantastic run this year, with the releases of Diddy Kong Racing, GoldenEye 007, Star Fox 64, Tomb Raider 2, Everybody's Golf, Gran Turismo, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and Fallout. Needless to say, fighting games also benefited from the likes of Bloody Roar, Darkstalkers 3, The King of Fighters 97, Rival Schools, Soul Blade, Tekken, and Street Fighter 3. This year of media was a good time had by all. But that's just when the game was released. Our story with today's game takes place in 1998, during a birthday that will introduce us to our favorite fighting game series in general. Well, was. Thanks, NRS. This is Team Crossbody, and this is Mortal Kombat 4's RUNBACK. Mortal Kombat 4 is the 1997 sequel to Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Developed and published by Midway Games, it's the first in the series to use 3D graphics, officially retiring a digitized look, and it's also the last MK game to have an arcade release, with home ports coming out in 1998 for the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, Windows, and the Game Boy Color. The less said about that port, the better. Before we talk about the development of MK4, let's talk about Midway the company. Founded in 1958, the company began life as Midway Manufacturing, and it stood as one of the earliest American video game developers. Mostly sticking to the arcade market,
where they published some of the most successful games like Space Invaders and Miss Pac-Man. They also made some household names like NBA Jam, Rampage, and Spy Hunter. Needless to say, if you were in the States, it was hard to find an arcade game with Midway's name not on the cover. The company has many other games released, but I'll get to the point. In 1991, programmer Ed Boon and artist John Tobias were tasked by Midway Games to develop a fighting game within a year, intended to serve as a competitor to Capcom's massive hit Street Fighter II. They envisioned the game being very similar to Data East's Karate Champ, but featuring digitized characters, and the data they shared from the start. Mortal Kombat begun life as a ninja-themed fighting game that was ultimately rejected by Midway higher-ups. The company instead pitching the game based on 1992's Universal Soldier, starring a digitized version of Jaw Claw Van Damme. You know, Jaw Claw Van Damme from Streets.
Are you men enough to fight with me?
Anyone who opposes me will be destroyed.
Colonel, you can't!
Oh yes, I can. Just take the hostages out. If I'm not topside in 15 minutes, evacuate without me. Both of you. That's an order.
But when those plans fell through, they returned to their original concept, and 10 months later, a bouncing baby Mortal Kombat was born. A massively successful bouncing baby Mortal Kombat. So successful that Mortal Kombat would come to define the company and become the crown jewel in the company's home console strategy, with MK releasing on home systems the following year to even more praise. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, however. Due to the graphic nature of the game and the increased number of hyper-violent video games that popped up between 92 and 93, shocking parents and I guess anyone who walked past an arcade cabinet or a home console. This sparked the 1993 US Senate hearing on video games, fearing the corruption of society because V-games begin to put more human-like figures in them, such as Mortal Kombat.
Out with a 64-bit system in the future, but the point of that is that graphics are going to become much better, and my sense is that unless we can get everybody in this business, not just the video game companies, but the retailers and the government, involved in putting a stop to the kind of things that you're seeing in Night Trap, we're really deceiving ourselves that we're going to keep this kind of violence out of the hands of children.
These hearings resulted in the entertainment software industry being given a year to work out some type of rating system, or the government would step in and make their own. This eventually gave birth to the ESRB, or the Entertainment Software Rating Board, a system that requires all video games to be rated and for these ratings to be printed on the game's packaging. All that aside, the good times kept rolling on with 1993's MK2 and 1995's MK3 and UMK3, as well as 1996's MK Trilogy, which lead us to today's focus, Mortal Kombat 4.
During development, the team faced difficulties with the new 3D graphics as they had no experience with making them, but they did intend on having similar mechanics to previous entries from the beginning. I guess to avoid any gameplay slip-ups made by 1997 War Gods, Midway's first attempt at a 3D fighter. While in its advertisement cycle, Midway took the game in the themed Bosch truck to several arcades around America to hype the game's release, where many people in these areas got to play an incomplete version of the game that featured many bugs and a small number of playable characters that spurred few or no special moves at all. While out on this road tour, Mortal Kombat 4 went through several revisions that fixed bugs, changed and added characters, completed movesets, and added additional fatalities to all the roster members. I've never got to experience this tour due to me being a kid at the time. But looking at old interviews and whatnot, I've grown to discover my favorite version of Sonya Blade.
A game called Mortal Kombat Special Forces, which stars Sonya.
Hi. Hi.
The final version of MK4 that appeared in arcades officially was Revision 3, which was the version that was eventually ported to every home console. The general opinion of MK4 as a whole that I could gather was that while the graphics are good, the gameplay was solid but largely uninspired. with the worst version clearly being the GBC port. No, I'm not going to subject you people to any more of that. Although not the focus of our video and getting a little off topic, there's a couple more things I want to cover before finishing this section. An enhanced version of Mortal Kombat 4 was released only for the Dreamcast in 1999 called Mortal Kombat Gold, which added additional characters, stages, and I'm sure some rebalancing. I never got to play the game myself, but from what I can see of the game, it looks super unbalanced with its new characters breaking it. Reviews reflected this, with the critical response being a resounding meh, touting the game's worst graphics and game-breaking bugs. A year before MK4's release, a one-season, 13-episode cartoon based on the series was made called Mortal Kombat: Defenders of the Realm. The series followed a group of combatants assembled by Raiden to defend Earthrealm from various invaders who enter through portals from other dimensions. The series served as something of a mismatch of an alternate sequel to the first MK film and the events of UMK3. And while not having anything to do with MK4's story, it does have the debut of Quan Chi, so that's new. While the show is clearly not very good, personally, I can't say that I hate it, but I get why the show got negative reviews and was ultimately cancelled. They took MK and tried to turn it into G.I. Joe, with no one ever really dying and teaching life lessons by the end of each episode. That's like trying to turn Doom into a Saturday morning cartoon show for kids. Although I do believe an MK series in this fashion could absolutely work. Maybe one day. 2 months after MK4's launch, the absolute worst fighting game movie was made, 1997's Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Tell me, did you make Raiden beg for his life before destroying him?
Raiden is of no concern to us.
You let him live?
He could not be stopped.
I have no use for excuses.
While it's light years from the original movie in terms of giving a damn, I must admit that it's dumb. Like, really dumb. So dumb that it falls into a certain charm. But it's bad. Let's not get that twisted. Another short-lived series was 1998's Mortal Kombat Conquest, which was one of the first live-action shows based on the video game, if you count the Super Mario Bros. Super Show segments. The series had one season consisting of 22 episodes and served as a prequel to the games. Following the Great Kung Lao after his first win in the Mortal Kombat tournament, he is now tasked with training the next generation of warriors who will defend Earthrealm and presumably follow him into the next tournament. The show was very messy with the story, but it showed little flashes of potential for what the story could be from time to time. It was apparently canned due to ballooning production costs because even with its flaws, the show was popular. Quan Chi was hands down one of the best things about the show.
My 3 skilled assassins.
Mika was hurt.
Mika is dead! You all are.
That doesn't mean I can't feel pain in this body.
Maybe I'll change your body and show you real pain.
Sorry about the detour. I don't know another chance we would get to talk about these kind of things. And I would like to talk about all these things individually, YouTube permitting. But I think we've covered enough. It's time to get into the game itself with the presentation. I don't know how to feel about the graphics of MK4. While I can't say they're bad, on the other hand, I don't just want to praise them or come across as biased. This is the PlayStation version of the game, and I can tell you for free that the Nintendo 64 version looks a lot better. Of course, the arcade version looks the best.
but we wanted to stick to the home ports because that's what would have been available to us at the time. We got this game initially for the N64, but we never got to play the Sony Pony edition, so we thought it'd be neat to base the video around this instead. And if we're talking about the PlayStation version, then the looks on hand aren't very impressive. But MK4 exports some of our favorite versions of these characters, including Raiden, Liu Kang, Quan Chi, Shinnok, and even the last minute Kano, Katana, and new substitutes, Jarrett, Rico, and Tanya, who don't look too bad. Now, of course, we had to agree on the coolest looking character in the game, and for some reason that's Sonya Blade. I personally don't know why or what it is about the costume that we like so much, but I think it's even better than her UMK3 outfit, and I love that look for her. Anyway, a major perk of owning the PS1 port of MK4 was getting to see the arcade engines in full FNV. And while you can see the visible seams and joints of these models, they're all still good looking and do the job. The N64 owners got to see these scenes in the dramatization form with the actual character models themselves, which are still pretty faithful. Stages in MK4 are super diverse, with most stages having some type of book or set piece, like the Hype Phase stage known as Elder God, the Living Trees in the, Living Forest, the Thunder and Lightning of the Wind stage, the Giant Fan of the Prison, and the completely sick looking Reptiles lair. There are some bland ones, like the Well and Shaolin Temple, but most arenas look great and have a good amount of detail on them.
MK4, for all of its faults, has a really cool aesthetic, and the soundtrack composed by Dan Forden has to be one of our favorites in the series. This was one of the more darker entries, and the music reflects that with an ominous tone to almost all of the music, backed by some really aggressive and rhythmic percussions, and some tracks that I can only describe as spooky synth, almost as if you're a part of some far-off ancient hidden away death tournament, which I guess is what Mortal Kombat is in a nutshell. Although the Mortal Kombat tournament itself isn't even the focus of the game's narrative. The soundtrack is highly atmospheric, and you can't mistake this music for anything else. And not that fake atmosphere that the current games are providing with their boring, blockbuster, trailer-esque music since MK9. But that's a rant for another day. Here are some samples of the OST so you can get a feel of what we're talking about. as if almost designed to undercut everything I just said about the dark and moody atmosphere of the music, are the completely cartoony Kombat with the K battle cries. These are the stuff of legend and are very funny, but I think MK works best when it can be dark and serious while still having some fun. Here's a couple of these awesome sound bites.
Check it out! Can I take your order? You want to settle?
What you did not? Who am I gonna throw you over there?
I'm fucking big time! Jamaica!
Get this out!
This strange combination of extremely aggressive, almost sinister music and odd out-of-place noises did a number to our small baby brains, because I vividly remember us being too afraid to even turn on this game, and instead wanting to go play GoldenEye to shoot some equally sinister-looking mud people instead. While not the best in the series, MK4's music is what I consider quintessential Mortal Kombat, especially that hidden track, Thought Lost Media, that was unearthed just now.
Excellent. Sonya. Round 1. Fight!
Check it out! Check it out! Check it out!
Oh, baby.
Check it out! Check it out! Check it out!
Outstanding.
The story of MK4 centers around the release of the falling elder god Shinnok, with the aid of the sorcerer Quan Chi, after his 1,000-year banishment to the Netherrealm by Raiden and the remaining elder gods after a war that spanned hundreds of years. Shinnok seeks vengeance against the gods for his imprisonment, and in order to put a stop to Shinnok once and for all, Raiden turns to the aid of Earthrealm heroes who all save the realms from the threat of Shao Kahn. Much like the story of MK3, the tournament itself is not the main focus here, instead zeroing in on a big bad who is taking the fight beyond the ring, with Shinnok himself being a much bigger threat than the previous villain, the powerful but highly intelligent Shao Kahn. Don't listen to NRS. Unlike his fellow boss Khan, Shinnok doesn't really put up much of a fight during his boss battle, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Mortal Kombat 4's arcade mode is the ever-reliable ladder mode. This mode has you selecting from multiple towers that are ranked from Novice, which are 7 fights total, to Master 2, which are 9 fights. You can rotate each tower ahead of time to choose what group of pre-selected combatants you'll wish to face, but despite who you go up against, the final 2 fights are always reserved for the sub-boss Prince Goro, at least in the console ports, and the man himself, Shinnok. Compared to the boss battles of MK Pass, Shinnok puts up a pretty pathetic resistance against you. It's sad, really. Shinnok has the ability to take the moves of any of the roster members, similarly to Shang Tsung, but his refusal to do so just nukes any form of difficulty that could have been had. Anyway, Pope Hat Hair doesn't have any special moves of his own, so he'll chase you around the arena, trying to attack you with a simple high punch, high kick, back low kick string, with the occasional bone breaker and weapon draw sprinkled in, until you're done watching him struggle, and decide to explode his face, sending him screaming and plummeting back down to his forever home, the Netherrealm.
And there you go. You successfully protected reality itself from the fallen elder god Shinnok. From here, you are treated to your character's endings, and man, these endings are the living definition of mixed bag. So we'll only show you 3 endings. 1 stupid, 1 confusing, and 1 good. And no, it won't be the Sonya Jackson Jared trilogy live from Idiot Cliff. It's been done to death. I've got these endings from the YouTube channel Life and Death Live, in case you're wondering. This ending sparked a long-running controversy among the MK community that Rico was in some way Shao Kahn. And while there was plans for this to be true on some level, it never came to be. There was very little thought put into this ending, and it was largely meant to be a joke, but as it stands, it is and always will be very confusing.
By defeating you, Sub-Zero, I have avenged the death of my family and clan. Now my soul can finally rest.
Your soul will never rest, Scorpion. The Lin Kuei may have been responsible for your murder, but your family's true killer still remains free.
If you are not the murderer, then who is?
I am the one you seek. To defeat my nemesis Sub-Zero, I needed the power of a Spectre. You've done my bidding well, Scorpion. But now I must return you to the Netherrealm.
Never!
This one starts off fine enough, but falls apart when Quan shows his stupid pinhead-like face. Why in the hell would you reveal your true involvement to Scorpion? If you had kept your mouth shut, you might have had a powerful ally. And why didn't Quan have a backup plan just in case someone rushed him during this long startup? And that little oh shit shimmy he does during Scorpion's glory charge only adds to the stupidity. And the icing on the cake is this overly dramatic Darth Vader-esque note. Dude, don't you live here? Why are you geeking out? And besides, you got out the first time, do it again. Or if Shinnok still around, ask him. You got him out the first time, I'm sure he's more than willing to do you a solid. Calm down.
For millions of years, I suffered in the bowels of the Netherrealm. You, Thunder God, are responsible for my suffering. Now the piteous mortals of Earth will pay for my grievance. You turned against your fellow Elder Gods. You betrayed your title. You deserve much worse. But it's too late, Raiden. I win! With the Elder Gods out of the way, I will take my rightful place as ruler of all eternity. I can already feel the power surging from within. You're mad! Farewell, Thunder God.
You know, this ending is solid, and now it might be my favorite ending in the game now that I'm thinking about it. Shinnok is just gassing himself up to Raiden, the presumed last warrior on the side of good. It's a harmless ending for how silly the voice acting is, but I do think it gets its point across. As we said before, a major issue with MK4 is that it's uninspired, with gameplay feeling very similar to the previous MK3. Hell, even the menus are the same. MK4 has a couple of new additions, like bone breakers, weapons, throwable objects, and maximum damage, and I guess side steps? But that barely plays a factor into the gameplay as a whole. Despite being a 3D fighter, the actual 3D space matters very little in fights. It's mostly used to dodge projectiles or throwable objects while running in for a punish if close enough. Since those can be blocked, you'd rather just do that anyway. Other than trying to keep your back away from the wall, sidestepping can be more useful if your character gets stuck at a certain point in the map and are unable to leave it, which does happen every now and then. Other than that, this game is primarily played in 2D or 2D.5. This game is rather confusing to place in terms of error. While it does share classic MK gameplay, the extra dimension, though limited, cannot be ignored since regardless of how limited it is, it exists. So the question is Mortal Kombat 4 a classic or a 3D era game? And the answer to that is how you look at it. There's camps on both sides. Personally, I'll put it in the 3D era, if not for the gameplay, because the game is literally 3D and they all will be going forward. MK4 uses a 6-button layout: low punch, high punch, low kick, high kick, run, and block, with the newly added side stat being executable by double tapping the run button. When LP is used close to the opponent, they will be thrown. The same goes for LK. Doing this will allow your character to do a special throw called a Bone Breaker attack, which is essentially another throw. Both type of throws can't be broken, which is rather stupid seeing how fast they come out, and both throws can be implemented in different ways during combat, especially the Bone Breaker attacks, but more on that later. When close to your opponent, you can initiate a chain combo. These types of combos are common in most fighting games. They can be compared to strings like in Tekken or Virtua Fighter, Gatlins like in Guilty Gear, or Magic Series like in MVC or most anime fighters. Close HP and HK can be cancelled into any special move or run. Ending a chain in the uppercut will put a character into a juggle state, allowing you to follow up in that way. Normals are shared among the cast, so picking up a character is rather simple. The only thing you should focus on when labbing a particular character is the special moves and the throws they have. And if you're lucky, your character can be blessed with one of the 3 Godbreaker throws that are so powerful, so broken, that they supersede a character's moveset and can make someone viable by just having them.
MK3 had an issue with damage, combos, and events, so Midway took notice and they implemented the max damage system for MK4, which behaves more like a damage cap for combos that go over 40%. Once that damage is reached, both characters will be forced away from each other and return to neutral, so in a way it behaves like a grandfather to the breaker system for later games. Much like most things lazily implemented into a system to band-aid problems with the previous game, max damage can be worked around. There are certain setups some characters can use to take advantage and actually game the system. Scorpion, for example, can use a spare in certain combos to activate the max damage knockback, which will blast him back and will still drag the dazed opponent towards you, leaving enough time for him to recover and connect with a follow-up attack for a free combo after hitting the damage cap. The second combo isn't optimized, but I'm sure this can lead to a 2-touch kill, or at least 2.5. Another example is Fujin while using a club weapon. He can bypass the damage cap as well, albeit in the corner. What I did here was land a dive kick and follow up with a wind lift. After slamming them back down with the follow-up, hit them with the weapon against the screen and run up and do it again. This should activate max damage at a chunky 52%. Once again, the opponent will not be knocked away due to already being in a capture state, allowing Fujin to recover before Jack scan. After that, land another wind lift and slam and finish with however way you like. With this netting 51%. I'm sure blocking the weapon throw is an option, but this is just an example. While jumping, you have 2 ways to transition into combos. High punch provides you with a traveling jumping attack. Low kick and high kick can also give you a jumping combo starter, but that can only be done from a neutral jump. This game has an interesting glitch in which you can perform a neutral jump kick seconds before leaving the ground. I'm not sure on how this works completely, but my theory is that if you can manage to hit the kick buttons before entering pre-jump frames. Does this game have pre-jump frames? Anyway, hitting it will cause your character to jump kick as soon as they leave the ground. It's hard, like really hard to do. You have to hit the jump and up buttons at almost the exact same time. I found that hitting both low kick and high kick while tapping up made the glitch appear more consistently for me. And from what I can see from what little high level gameplay there is, that it might be good for pressuring the opponent as well, but it might not be worth it because it's so difficult to do and you'll just be jumping for no reason if mistimed. We've mentioned this attack before. And Bone Breaker might be the featured attack of the game outside of weapons. When low kick is used close to someone, the character will be thrown in a more violent way. This could range from cool throws like Reptile, Raiden, or Fujin, to goofy ones like Quan Chi, Sub-Zero, or Scorpion. Bone Breakers and low punch throws are similar in use, but Bone Breaker deals much more damage and puts you in much better positions. So I don't see what's the point of using normal throws. Throws in general work weird in this game. Again, they can't be tech-like in most games, but more importantly, throws can OTG, or off the ground. Both throws can be used in this way, with low punch throwing the opponents away, but bone breakers restand, and some can be looped and even used for a free hit. In general, bone breakers are great on everyone, but not all of them are created equally. At this time, I would like to present the fabled bone breakers. These are, and in our opinion, the most broken attacks of the game. We dub these the God Breaker attacks, which are the Kadama Kick, the Underpit Assault, and the Really Shouldn't Hurt attack.
Finish him!
Most of these bone breaker throws are just big damage and that's it. Some even leave characters negative, like Sonya's neck breaker, but these throws, only usable by Jared, Jax, Rico, and Scorpion, are so plus that they can be looped until max damage or used to get a free hit to start a chain combo. Now this doesn't make them the best characters in the game, although Rico might be considered, a contender, as characters with good twos will always be the better option. But what do we know? We don't play this game competitively. When shooting fireballs, breaking bones, and chain comboing opponents isn't just enough, characters have convenient weapons stashed away in their pockets. No, seriously, they pull them from out their pockets. Each character has their own weapon, giving you more tools to play with, despite weapons behaving the same way because they're grouped in certain types, like a sword giving you this and a club giving you that. However, certain weapons are wholly unique, like Tanya's boomerang or Fujin's laser crossbow. The only weapon with a completely unique attack is Sub-Zero's Frost Club that has a freezing threats attack that comes out relatively fast. Midway must have thought these weapons were seriously overpowered because if you're touched just once while holding one, the character will drop them. This hurts the weapons because some are actually useful, but this decision overall ruins consistency, making them harder to use. If digging in your pockets to pull out a weapon proves too risky though, inputting the command for said weapon during a grounded combo will instantly bring them out, either finishing the combo or giving you a pop-up for a jump. And once dropped, any character can pick up any weapon by standing over it and pressing the crouch button while hitting run. Some characters are actually better with other characters' weapons, and if you input the character's weapon command again while holding them, they'll throw it. Speaking of picking things up and throwing them, on some stages there are throwable objects. To throw something, you just do the same thing you do with the weapon. Stand over them, crouch, and press run. If done right or near the object, they will throw them. These can be looked at as the interactables from later Midway/NRS games. Unlike those games, however, these only boil you down to tossing objects at people, no more, no less. Not only that, like 3 stages have them, so not only are they too situational, they're also rare to boot. Hey, at least this makes sidestepping slightly more viable. Yet, somehow with all these ill thought out and half-baked ideas, MK4 is surprisingly fun to play. It doesn't hold up, like, not at all to the other games in the franchise, but it has a weirdness to it. Like, it's just the right amount of crazy shit combined with all these poor attempts to keep the game balanced and fresh, and somehow it all works. And up till now, it still has a semi-unique way of playing. You can literally see the ideas of later games in MK4. The transition, though limited, into 3D, the weapons for each character, and the interactables. Each of these concepts were brought back and refined in future games, making MK4 very important in our opinion. And there's no telling where the franchise would be gameplay-wise if this didn't exist.
Finish him!
Mortal Kombat 4 is an awkward game more than a terrible one, being more held back by the context behind things than anything else. It was the last arcade game for the series when arcades were a dying market, with those versions not even having the world final / sub-boss until the home ports. Special moves aside, the cast largely plays the same. While having a very strong story, it was sandwiched between MK Mythologies and Special Forces, which are considered two of the worst games in the series. And worst of all, Sega and Namco released heavy hitters in the 3D fighting space with Virtua Fighter 3, Tekken 3, and Soul Calibur, some of the strongest in early 3D gaming. MK4's fence-sitting nature didn't help it stand out much because it wasn't 3D enough to hang with the big boys, but just 2D enough to suffer from the declining interest in that dimension of fighting games during that time. Oh, and not having a solid port was also a major problem. MK4 was destined to be the scapegoat for Midway's transition from pure 2D to pure 3D, and while it could have been better, clearly, a game in this fashion was inevitable. With all that being said, I'm sure us and a lot of other people like MK4 just the way it is. Bad endings and awkward gameplay and all. I'm not ashamed to say that this opinion is completely nostalgia driven, but I was pleasantly surprised with how much the gameplay, although just a more simplified version of UMK3, is still very much solid and playable. I don't recommend Mortal Kombat 4. It doesn't hold up when you can just play the superior MK trilogy, but there's still a lot of fun to be had, even with all of its faults. See you next time on the RUNBACK.
Come on! Come on! Let's finish this! Final blast! Come on! Hey, you okay?
There are little things that are consistent in this world. Death, taxes, and Dragon Ball games are among them. Being one of the oldest, most popular, and most successful cartoons around, the series is no stranger to video games spanning multiple genres and quality over its 40 years of relevance. And with the recent announcement of Dragon Ball Daima, for better or worse, we're not going to see this well dry up anytime soon. With so many games released, it would be hard to pick the right one for our first video about this historic franchise, or so you would think, because we were lucky enough to grow up in the 2000s when anime is making its first big push in the US, and Dragon Ball proved to be just popular enough to make its return to video games with today's title, our first Dragon Ball game. This is Team Crossbody, and this is Dragon Ball Z Budokai's RUNBACK.
The Dragon Ball Z Budokai games were developed by DIMPS, a development team that consists of several former SNK and Capcom staff, including Takayashi Nishiyama and Hiroshi Matsumoto, co-creators of several important fighting games such as Street Fighter and The King of Fighters. Although they developed most, if not all, of the modern Dragon Ball games, they may be more known for their run with the Sonic the Hedgehog series, starting with Sonic Advance and ending with Sonic Lost World. The team also created some very good lesser-known games like the Rumblefish series, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, and Soul Calibur 6. But they also developed some absolute stinkers like Crash Boom Bang, Sonic the Hedgehog 4, and Dragon Ball The Breakers. Those games come to mind. So the long and short is, when DIMPS is on the ball, they're really on the ball. But they are capable of some wide-ass misses, which I guess any company is capable of. I still like them. I really don't think I need to explain the plot of Dragon Ball. If you're watching this video, then there's no question you already know the story, whether it be intimate or even a courtesy glance. The tale of Dragon Ball is one of the most known and celebrated tales in the media, with Dragon Ball Z Budokai attempting to emulate the three major story arcs of the series, which are the Saiyan, Namek, and Android sagas, by hitting the more important fights and set pieces in the series. And for their first attempt, I think DIMPS did an amazing job at recreating these hallmark moments for the series, inconsistencies aside. Due to the abridged nature of the story mode, some of the more important details and contexts are lost, but for a 2002 retelling of a long finished series, it's really impressive, and I can see how someone can use this as their introduction. It really is a good job. This is a pretty meaty game mode, clocking in about an hour and a half depending on the difficulty and whatnot, but it's not all that there is to offer. Upon finishing the mode, you'll be able to play through unique what-if storylines, one within each saga. These stories here are pretty entertaining if a little simple. There's another unlockable what-if story, but we'll cover that later.
As can be said for most games that's the first in the long run of the series, the graphics of Budokai 1 don't hold up as well as the future entries, choosing to go for an admittedly generic 3D aesthetic. It still manages to capture the Toriyama art style fairly well, but what bothers me about the graphical style is the blocky nature of it. It's hard to explain, but it feels like there's too much negative space on the character models. They look bloated. The animation on hand hair, while serviceable, is clunky, choppy, and stiff, which make the characters come across like they're riddled with arthritis and are too afraid to move. There's also a ton of recycled animation, like a whole lot. The game coloring is fine for the characters. They're bright and colorful like on the show. As for the stages, they're all based off show locations, so grasslands, mountain ranges, Planet Namek, Kami's Lookout, and the Cell Games Arena are all represented. The problem with the stages is that they all look so lifeless, with big open spaces usually made up of one color the majority of the time. It feels like you're fighting in a cardboard diorama of the stage instead of actually being there. And in that case, I guess the hyperbolic time chamber is the best looking stage in the game, since it's meant to convey that loneliness. But with the lack of shading on locations and characters, the basic layout of stages and the flat coloring, things could look a tad washed out. But I don't want to sit here and just trash on the game completely, because I believe this is just the second fully 3D Dragon Ball game, with the first being Final Bout. And graphically, it is a step up from there.
Well, duh.
as yet to be surpassed if we're talking about Dragon Ball Z game music. The first game's music might be the safest of the series, leaning heavily on the rock side of things with very few jazzy funk vibes these games will soon be known for. But what's on hand here is still good for adding atmosphere to the fights. The soundtrack was made up of many different performers, chief among them being Kenji Yamamoto, who later found himself in a plagiarism scandal surrounding these games, which resulted in his music being removed from future games such as the Dragon Ball Z Budokai collection. Look, I know plagiarism is the big bad and all, and I certainly don't condone the act, but to be fair, if it weren't for his extreme sampling, I guess that's what words he would call it, I would have never been introduced to some of my favorite bands that I listen to religiously today, like Black Sabbath, Journey, and especially the mighty Stratovarius. So I have a hard time not looking at the man with some level of fondness. We don't know what became of Yamamoto after the scandal, but I like to think that he's currently on the run from Toei and is now living underground as a soldier of fortune. And if you can find him, he'll be happy to lift some tunes for you. For once, we're going to bring up the gameplay modes in one of these videos because we keep forgetting to add it. Dragon Ball Z Budokai has a good number of things to do with about 5 gameplay focused modes. Of course, you have the story mode, but there's also Versus, World Tournament, Practice, and the unlockable Legend of Hercule mode, with the other option being, well, options, and then the editing skill / shop area. Since we already covered the story, let's quickly run down the other modes available. Versus mode is exactly what you think it is, and does exactly what you think it does. You can either choose to play with a friend, the CPU, or watch the CPU play both characters. World Tournament mode will have your chosen fighter compete for a large sum of Zenny, the currency in the Dragon Ball world. By selecting your difficulty at the beginning, this can change the number of fights, how tough the opponents are, and the payout if you find your way to the top. What's also neat is that matches actually play by tournament rulings, so KOing the opponent isn't the only option, as throwing them out of the ring is perfectly acceptable. This will be your only way to obtain Zenny for the shop system. Practice mode had you beat up on a dummy in a safe environment. There's a couple of options that take advantage of certain situations that might actually come up in a real match, but it's mostly pointless. You can't even set up 2 players if you actually want to laugh something out. The Legend of Hercule mode will unlock after you've gotten not only Hercule, but all the other characters with the exception of the Great Saiyaman. He's in this game too. And when an Adept World Tournament run, after that, go to the item shop and it'll be there to buy in the recommended section. This is the other what if story that was mentioned earlier. In this mode, which has its own title section for whatever reason, you play the guy. No, not Darkside Phil.
I'll be giving away 2 copies of RoboCop.
The actual guy, the dude, the man, the best character in the series, the world's martial arts champion, Hercule. This is at the beginning of the Cell games, when he makes his grand appearance, but instead of being bitch slapped away to make room for the real fight, he hangs around and challenges every single contestant, starting at Yamcha all the way to Cell himself while fighting under special conditions at times, and proceeds to beat the brakes off of all of them in an attempt to grift his shitty book on people. But I guess he just did save the world from Cell, so maybe the book isn't entirely shitty. I enjoy this mode a lot. It's funny and does the right thing for the community and brings this man into the spotlight. He has something to say about everyone at the games except Yamcha, because he's the first victim. I'm a massive fan of Hercule, so returning to the silly mode after all this time brought a smile to my face. And then there's the other options menu, who cares, and then we get to the skill edit system, which brings us to the core of the game. Skills are the skill capsule system, or ESS, exciting skill system, or whatever the real name is, serves as the main hook of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai games. The long and short is that it allows the player to customize characters with loadouts, giving them the ability to bring out their own unique fighter into a match. What you're allowed to put into said loadout is defined by 3 categories. Abilities are capsules that provide the character with their signature abilities, from blast attacks, transformations, and ultimate attacks. Physical skills is where all the most memorable moves go, like Zanku Fist, Evil Dance, and Cybernetic Radar. That's kind of a dope name for a move though. In reality, this is where all the filler moves go. For some reason, throws need to be equipped into a fighter. Try figuring that one out. I could understand if throws weren't absolutely needed in this game, but they really are. More on that later. Equipables with unique effects and stat modifying abilities go here under the support tag. For something as simple as upping your attack and defense, to infecting your opponent with a heart virus that they'll need to counteract with a vaccine. Equipping multiples of the same skill will power it up, and this can be done up to 3 times per skill. For what it's worth, there's a visual change to some of the moves in the match as they do more damage, so that's kinda neat. And that's what this system is, kinda neat. Dims expected players to go over their friend's house to play and trade these things around like scuffed Yu-Gi-Oh cards. But the truth is, there's not a lot here to promote all that. I might be missing something, but it's not like the skills are locked behind exclusive Budokai games. Everything is unlockable in-game, so why would I ever brave the streets of Philadelphia with a memory card in my pocket in 2002? Another reason why this just doesn't work, at least for me, is the fact that while they wanted people to make a unique version of their character, no one wanted to equip 2 to 3 general vests, because you only have 7 slots to play around with, which is either evil or some kind of theming. Some characters like Goku are positively bedridden with transformations that will easily take most of his slots. So players who want to play as a Super Saiyan and do a cool yellow Kamehameha will have to equip 3 versions of Kaioken, that's called King Scott's Fist for some reason, then equip a Super Saiyan skill, which is already like 4 slots. Then you need a throw. So here, that's 5 wasted before you can throw any kind of special attack on that tray. It just seems really annoying and cumbersome to try to do anything else. I suppose if you're still unlocking these skills, filling them up with support moves would be an option. But I don't know, man, I could be wrong. As a kid, I never used any of these support skills and just opted for more powerful attacks overall. By getting the Dragon Balls, you can unlock a single character's breakthrough skill, which allows them to use all their abilities at 1.5 their normal power. And this is the most optimal way to build a character. Overall, I wanted to say that the skill system is this super slept on part of the game, but it's mostly just kind of annoying. This is a mindset I kept throughout, so the future videos about the Budokai series might just omit this part of the game entirely, unless there's something cool that can come from it.
Dragon Ball Z Budokai carries the weight of being the first console Dragon Ball game in 5 years, following the questionable GT final bout, and if there was a mission going into be better than that one, then mission accomplished. Although it really wasn't much of a hurdle to jump, but they did indeed do it. Budokai is better than Final Bout.
Well done.
This is a 3D fighter with a focus on being simple, so the game sports an equally simple 4-button control setup of punch, kick, energy, and guard. Punch, kick, and guard shouldn't shock anyone by their function, but there's something going on with the energy button. Hitting the button on its own will allow the character to shoot out a little deflectable energy blast, but pressing the button after a sequence of other buttons will allow the character to perform a skill. Every skill outside of throw requires an energy button to be used. Speaking of skills, Budokai will have you perform these legendary attacks in the eyeball manner. Instead of using commands like quarter circle forward or forward down forward, the game will rather have you complete this certain sequence of strings, such as punch 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 E or punch punch KKE. And while doing special moves this way are certainly unique, I'm not sure if it was entirely needed. Normal fighting game commands would have been perfectly viable, since the character could only move in 3D space while pressing the guard or up and down at the same time. All this did was limit combat options. There's a couple of button combinations that do special things. Pressing PG will allow you to throw your opponent if it's equipped. PKG will enable your character to transform. Transformation increases attack power but drains ki, while in this state, getting knocked down while under the base requirements of that transformation will cause your character to revert back to a previous state or return to their base form. While guarding, pressing the back button twice will allow your character to key charge, allow them to use skills. Finding the proper moments to sneak some charging in is very important. This will usually happen during knockdowns. Hitting all the face buttons will have you taunt. Taunting reduces ki by 1 point. Pressing PK or KG will have the character charge energy into a single attack. I don't know the name of these attacks, but we'll just call them charge attacks. These attacks are unblockable if fully charged, and are immune to basic strikes while they're active, only losing to skills and throws. Although the immunity to this move seems to be inconsistent, which could be seen in a lot of areas of this gameplay, but we'll get into that in a bit. When two attacks of the same kind connect, the screen will freeze and both players will be thrown into a special state called a burst zone. During this, both fighters will begin to throw punches and kicks at supersonic speeds while bad lightning effects surround them. At this time, the players will have to spin a left analog stick or mash the face buttons. By the end of this minigame, the player who has the most inputs will come out on top of it, knocking the opponent away or popping them up, the result depending on the character chosen. If the player is doing particularly bad during a burst zone, the opponent attacks will begin to connect. I assume this added extra damage, but I was way too busy mashing to check it. Sorry. Much like the show, characters can fly, but they need a little bit of assistance getting up there. Hitting the opponent with a Larsen attack will leave them in the air. That's about it. There is no change in the character's movesets for as far as I know. Certain stages have transitions attached to them. They can be done by knocking an opponent past the edge of the stage. It's just used for extra damage, though it does look cool at the end of combos. While performing a charge attack, it can be cancelled by hitting the guard button. This will return your character to a neutral stance. Some strings may have a chargeable property somewhere in them, and by cancelling these attacks, it will allow the character to go to another string if there's enough hits done from the last cancelled attack. This can be used for pressure on block or combo extensions. Sidestepping after a cancelled attack to get behind the opponent will earn you with a stun, allowing you to do further follow-ups and damage. This is the most advanced the game gets, which is a bad thing because it's all downhill from here.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. Budokai 1's gameplay is bad. Like, really bad. If you care about the viability of a fighting game that's over 20 years old. The game is just plain inconsistent to a ridiculous degree, even for 2002 standards. Bloody Roar 3, Dead or Alive 3, Fighting Vipers 2, Tekken 4, and Virtua Fighter 4 all released a year early, and there were plenty more before 2001, so I don't understand why this game is so sloppy. There's a ton of issues, but I'm just gonna rapid fire a couple of these. Blast attacks can be done with just a punch E string. The problem here is that unless these strings don't end with popping the opponent up, then they won't combo. Luckily there's more than one way to pull these off, but it's still strange. Adding on to this issue is the fact that even if you can combo off the basic punch string, the actual skill is unsafe on hit, and doesn't knock the opponent back, so doing them just puts you at a disadvantage. Not all moves do this, but most do. Particular basic kicking animation has the tendency to whiff after 2 or 3 hits in. This string is mostly given to the bigger characters. Other than charging attacks, dashing attacks, and throws, there is no true way to break guard. Matches devolve into block, attack, while trying to sneak in the throw, which can get pretty monotonous if you're playing the game any longer like an hour, being generous. Unless we were playing wrongly, there is no real triangle system like the usual block, strike, throw in this game. The closest we can piece together is block, strike, charge attack, and I guess those are supposed to lose the throws, but there were several occasions when throws lose cleanly to these attacks. Blast attacks seem to do way less damage than other attacks, which doesn't make sense because these are attacks that destroy entire planets and vaporize whole non-key protected people. I guess this was a way of balancing due to these attacks being tied to the end of strings, and I guess that makes sense? It's still stupid. Throws shouldn't be doing more damage than the Kamehameha and Galick Gun. Some skill activations are so slow that they don't even combo out of strings, wasting ki and leaving you unsafe. The best way to land these are through staggering them or landing them from behind the opponent because the other character will have to turn so they can't block. Look, I want to say that the game having so many issues means that it was unfun to play, but the truth is, if 2 players go into it knowing that it's flawed like this, there is fun to be had. Just look at how many matches we play, and that's just from one recorded segment. We wouldn't have played so many matches if the game was truly a chore to play. Once gotten into a kind of rhythm, a meta starts to develop. Not a very good one, but a meta nonetheless, where you can begin to take advantage of what little unique traits your characters have to gain some kind of edge. There's fun. It's not long fun, but there's fun.
Is Dragon Ball Z Budokai a good video game? Yes. The story mode alone, I believe, is enough to check out this unique part of DBZ gaming history. There's plenty of content and unlocks to be discovered, even if a lot of those unlocks are samey looking moves. And the combat system isn't too bad when you're just playing the AI to get to those things. But is it a good fighting game? No. Shockingly, I know. Similar to Arcana Heart, Bloody Roar 3, and Mortal Kombat 4, Dragon Ball Z Budokai is a game that we hold dear, especially since we had to repeat the story mode so many times for us not having a memory card. Back in the day, we didn't care about the game mechanically, we just had fun mashing around, and that's where the game is at its best when it's not being taken too seriously, because to be fair, there is nothing in terms of compelling gameplay here, even for the time. Of course, anyone who knows anything about this series of games know that it's all uphill from here. Well, sort of. We'll get to you soon, Budokai 2 and Burst Limit. But putting those two aside, there was nothing that the first entry had that couldn't be expanded on. And luckily it was proven, while not a good fighting game, Budokai 1 was a very good starting point for the series. See you next time on the RUNBACK.
Fuxan. What? Fuxan, do you know any sailors? Sailors? No, I don't.
You know Sonic the Hedgehog, we know Sonic the Hedgehog, the next generation of humans will know about Sonic the Hedgehog, and I bet Sega will still be making mid to trash games. Sonic has to be the only series we know that is completely carried by its fan base, but we're talking about Sonic back in the 90s, where they were still making solid games. Now let's not go crazy, it's still Sonic, but the track record was still more good than bad. Now, we all know what the good ones are, but the series does have its fair share of really underrated entries. Sonic Spinball, Labyrinth, and R, and today's game comes to mind. This is Team Crossbody, and this is Sonic the Fighter's RUNBACK. Sonic the Fighter's development apparently began as a side project done in the spare time of a Sega AM2 character designer, Masahiro Sugiyama. Oh, and Sega AM2 is a division within Sega of Japan tasked with creating primarily arcade games that was formed in the 1990s and spearheaded by Yu Suzuki, creator of several well-known Sega games such as Virtua Fighter, Daytona USA, and Shenmue.
Fuxan. What? Fuxan. What? Fuxan. What? Fuxan. Fuxan, do you know any sailors?
Anyway, Sugiyama added crude, unfinished, but playable versions of Sonic and Tails to the previously released game Fighting Vipers, which caught the eye of AM2's head Yu Suzuki, who then pitched the concept of Sonic the Fighters and a dev that impressed Sonic team enough for them to approve and supervise the project. Originally going by the name Sonic Championship, the team chose to keep the game on the Fighting Vipers engine, modifying it to reflect the cartoony world of Sonic, as well as simplifying the gameplay for more mass appeal. Despite this, Sonic the Fighters and Fighting Vipers are still closely related in gameplay style, and since Sonic the Fighters' idea came from placing a Sonic character in the Fighting Vipers, the team decided to place a Fighting Vipers character into this new game, choosing the series' flagship, fashion designer Honey, which was a good fit given that her fighting style was heavily cat influenced, but she was never finished and was locked behind the game's arcade version, seemingly to be never discovered. Sonic the Fighters was planned to be ported to the Sega Saturn but was cancelled. The reason behind this is that they ran into difficulties trying to emulate a similar experience to their arcade version, so that left the game as an arcade exclusive until 2005, when it was used as a packing game along with several other rare Sonic games for the Sonic Gems collection for the GameCube and PS2. The game was re-released in 2012 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. This included an online versus as well as a finally completed Honey the Cat, along with her fellow unused playable characters in Dr. Robotnik and Metal Sonic.
Sonic the Fighter's story is stupid for Sonic and fighting game standards. So when Eggman decides to take revenge on Sonic and his friends by deploying a bunch of robots to invade Earth from his space station, the Death Egg 2, Sonic and Tails catch wind of this. Tails deciding to build a single-seated rocket ship called the Lunar Fox to reach the Doctor's station. This rocket, for some reason, needs the power of the Chaos Emeralds and not just, fuel. Also, instead of just sending Sonic to go wreck his ship per usual, they decide to suddenly become glory hungry and throw a tournament to decide who would take the seat, fly up, and stop Eggman. Each of the game's base roster members holds a Chaos Emerald, and as you can tell, there's 8. And any Sonic fan would know that there are 7 Chaos Emeralds in total, unless it's the first Sonic game, which is 6, or Sonic Spinball, which is 16. Fang apparently stole one. There's also Bark the Polar Bear and Bean the Dynamite, who are also just kinda nebulous given that they were made for this game alone. I don't think they know the main cast. Are they bad guys? In the comics they're considered bad guys since they hang out with Fang. Anyway, you beat up your friends and the 2 other guys, fly your way to the Death Egg 2, fight Metal Sonic, then beat up Robotnik, blow up his space station and fly your ass home. I understand that fighting game stories didn't matter much unless it was like Mortal Kombat around this time. But Sonic had at least 24 to 25 games by this point, and at the very least had a consistent world and characters. Kind of. Why couldn't they just make a story that made sense? Luckily for you people, I'm gonna fix the story real quick. First, there's only 7 Chaos Emeralds like normal. Seems really silly, even for 1996 to add an extra emerald for no real reason. Second, Eggman will use a cloning ray to split your fighter into 2 during the arcade run to justify the mirror match. How about using these guys to attack and steal the characters' respective emeralds so they don't have to go around bashing their friends up like morons? Third, Bark and Bean are useless. Make them bad guys along with Fang so your fighter isn't smashing clones all arcade run. Fourth, Fang doesn't need to steal an emerald if Eggman left him in charge of the clones. Maybe he has his own agenda, maybe not. I don't know much about Fang. Fifth, get rid of that Lunar Fox angle. Have them find some kind of teleporting device Fang was guarding or something. And then that can kick off the final fights. Lastly, after they defeat Eggman and whatnot, they can take a ship home and that's it. I know it doesn't matter in the long run, but this plot has bothered me since discovering this game all those years ago. It takes a bunch of unnecessary leaps to justify its plot when only a couple of brainstorming sessions was actually needed to iron this shit out. But I get it. They thought of it hella fast. I get it. Doesn't stop it from being annoying when all the pieces are right there to make a solid story. Just right there. I think stories in any fighting game matters. Duh. Plus, I'm convinced that Bark and Bean didn't work because the story of this game was so stupid. That, and they had, no kind of characterization at all. Who knows? If this plot was a little better, maybe those 2 would be a bit more memorable.
Sonic the Fighters has a very unique soundtrack when comparing it to other Sonic games released around this time, which is very important because it helped the game stand out. I don't know if this is the case to anyone else, but a lot of the game's music, especially the intro, sound like 90s workout music. For the task of making music and making it fit in the fighting game while keeping it feeling like a Sonic the Hedgehog entry, I feel like they did a really good job. Each track got a feeling to them that can be attracted if you look hard enough, like playful and chaotic, whimsical and magical, are frigid and dangerous. The only term I could use to describe the music is 90s greatness. It's that really specific era of music that's really hard to emulate, but you instantly know what era it's attached to if you play it during that time.
This game looks amazing, even by today's standards, which I guess can be said for most of the Model 2 games Sega pushed out around this time. They age more gracefully than most arcade games in general, at least for me. In case you didn't know, Sonic the Fighter stands as the first game in the franchise to sport fully 3D polygonal character models. I know, right? You would never know. These graphics do a fantastic job at capturing the personalities of the classic era Sonic characters. And for how simple these models look, they have some really impressive animations, especially when it comes to the squash and stretch element in them. It makes it feel like you're playing more of a Looney Tunes fighting game than a Sonic the Hedgehog one. Characters will be smashed, splattered, and crunched throughout the match, and it's all seamless and smooth. They nail the faces of these characters and put a massive focus on their giant mono eye, for better or worse. So you'll visually see them track the opponent and the camera in general, and it's all just very well done, and it still stands out quite well for over 30-year-old hardware. The arenas have just as much detail as the character models and seem to be based off 2 to 3 areas from various Sonic games. There's South Island, that's the obligatory Green Hill Zone, Mushroom Hill from In Knuckles, Casino Night, Dynamite Plant seems to be a mix of Chemical Plant and Oil Ocean zones, and Giant Wing seems to be inspired from Wing Fortress zones. The stages are good and does a good job at taking you around the Sonic the Hedgehog world, with its varied locales and themes. Much like his engine mates Fighting Vipers and Virtual Fighter 2, Sonic the Fighters is also a 3-button fighter with a punch and kick button. But instead of traditional blocking, this game features a unique barrier mechanic, but a little on that in a bit. Attacks in Sonic the Fighters come in the form of strings, quick commands like forward P, and motion inputs that vary in actions like fireballs and command grabs. There's a lot of shared universal attacks, but there's still a ton of unique attacks for every character. Fighting Vipers was pretty out there from a gameplay perspective when compared to Virtual Fighter, and Sonic the Fighter is even more crazier than Vipers. Every character gets access to launchers, OTGs, and giant jumping attacks, with the wall even coming into play, with every character having the ability to run up and jump off to escape the corner, or even perform unique actions from it. Getting smashed into the wall also causes the wall bounce, and there's a ton of ways to make this happen. The game also has air and ground recoveries because things get so nutty. Getting hit with all kinds of fast and large attacks and projectiles getting thrown around would really be annoying if there wasn't a way to deal with them other than using barrel. And the developers were ahead of the issue and introduced sidestepping to the game, making this the first AM2 game to feature one. There are two kinds of sidestepping, stepping in and stepping out. I don't think they have official names. Just pressing the PKB buttons together will cause a step out. That is solid for dodging projectiles but not actual attacks. At close range, it will get behind the opponent for a potential attack that is called a slip around. Pressing forward in PKB will cause a step in, which is a much stronger sidestep that can actually dodge opponents' upcoming attacks as well as projectiles that can be slipped around at close range. These actions as well as blocking will cancel your forward and back dashes and runs. Combine that with the occasional jump, full or short, and there's plenty of ways to approach your opponent. Sonic the Fighters is a pretty fast-paced game, and it's super cool that mobility options in this game are so varied because, as you can tell, it's not like Sonic and the other fighters can brag about having the best reach in the world. These guys are hella stubby, and will have to get in very close in order to get things done. Unless you want to be a dirty zoner about it. And I do.
Sonic the Fighters isn't some super deep fighting game like his granddaddy Virtua Fighter, and we're not here to make the case that it is, but that doesn't mean that there isn't any depth to be had, and that's where the unique blocking system called Barrier comes into play. You see, most fighting games rocking the block button will simply have you press that button and guess high or low, and that's about it. And while Sonic the Fighters does sport high and mid attacks, I believe there isn't any lows in the game, so popping up a barrier will guard against any attacks fired at you. Sounds pretty strong, right? Well, it would be if characters didn't have barrier breaking attacks that can destroy one of them. That's right, I said one, because not only can your own barrier be broken, each fighter only carries 5 of them by default, and once they're gone, that's it. No more blocking for you for the remainder of the match, and these don't replenish, again, by default. There are all kinds of ways to break past barrier. Guard break properties can be found attached to single strikes, in the middle of strings, or during dash attacks, throwing when a barrier is currently up, or even causing a slip around with break an active barrier. Another way to bypass barrier is to simply jump behind your opponent because they only protect what's in front of you. But if blocking isn't your style, you can always sacrifice one of your barrier stocks to enter a state called Hyper. In this state, the character damage is vastly reduced and any guard breaker properties are removed, but the recovery time on attacks is also greatly reduced, allowing you to hammer opponents with relentless attacks. This could be helpful to create on-the-fly combos to close out a match or put the opponent in a nasty strike throw situation. Characters also have special attacks that can be only done during hyper mode. The barrier and movement mechanics add a great layer of thinking without getting in the way of the game's simple design. Remember, the game was made to be playable by younger players. It's pretty impressive how the development team managed to sneak these things in, but I really shouldn't be shocked. These aren't rookies, I mean, they did make Virtua Fighter after all.
From a little side project to more of the unique entries within the franchise's history, Sonic the Fighters at least had to make a little impression to anyone who played it, especially during the early days of 3D gaming, as you'd be hard pressed to find a fighting game that featured fully rendered 3D characters being as expressive and animating the way that they do. The game, while simple, which didn't really help in winning over the more hardcore at the time, has a good amount of depth through its surprisingly well thought out mechanics and even helping the AM2 team add things that were never in their games to begin with, like sidestepping. The barrier meta, movement system, and hyper mode adds a lot to the game without hurting the simplicity. It may not be outwardly complex, but there's enjoyment to be had on both sides, both competitive and casual. Overall, Sonic the Fighters is a very well designed and charming game. It isn't perfect and it might have needed more time to cook, but as it stands, this is the only traditional fighting game in the Sonic the Hedgehog series, as Sonic Battle doesn't really count. I think. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. See you next time on the RUNBACK.
Sailor Moon was the earliest anime we remember watching as little kids because of the deep dubbing of the series that used to air back in the WB channel. We thought nothing of the show until it made its way to Toonami block years later. We were a little older and had a good amount of Dragon Ball Z in our bloodstream. So we reacted to the show the only way 2 8 or 9-year-old boys could suffer like Sailor Moon. A story about a girl fighting monsters in a skirt, talking about dating for 22 minutes an episode. And that was. But once you tell those boys Sailor Moon is something close to like Power Rangers, then you get this response. But in all seriousness, we ended up liking the show as we got older. Besides, you can't talk trash about Sailor Moon being lame when your ride or die show of all time is Hamtaro.
Toonami presents the story of a rodent with mad skills.
This intro is a mess. This is Team Crossbody, and this is Sailor Moon S's RUNBACK. Long Japanese title that I don't care how to figure out how to pronounce, also simply just called Sailor Moon S, was published by a company named Angel in 1994, which was a short-lived subsidiary to Bandai and was developed by an unknown team, which turns out to be an early Arc System Works. That's right, the developers of BlazBlue, Dragon Ball FighterZ, and more importantly, the life givers and takers of the Get the Gear series of games. They may have not been known as Arxes by the time when developing Sailor Moon, but several of the staff can be tied back to this game. It was never released outside of Japan due to the series being much bigger there than anywhere else, and there it stayed for many years until appearing at local fighting game tournaments, where it built a small cult following among players due to its silly unbalanced mechanics. As the name implies, the game is based on the popular anime and manga series Sailor Moon, and is set around its 3rd season, I believe. I mean, Sailor Mini Moon is there, and she was introduced in Season 2, but the Super Scouts or Outer Scouts are also acknowledged, so Season 3? Can you tell I don't remember a whole lot about the show outside of the geek version? And that's stretching it. Thus solving the issue of not finding any real history behind the development once and for all.
Once and for all!
No, just joking, there's a little more. In 1996, an updated follow-up was made for the game called Sailor Moon Super S that was based on the 4th season of the anime by the same subtitle. It disappointed many because of its lack of additional content and the outright nerfing and overall removal of mechanics and features that fans grew to love about the original. It did add an additional player Scout and Saturn, but the game just played overall worse. In 2019, a ROM hack of Super S was made by Metaquarius and several others in an attempt to improve off the many mistakes Super S made and make it a more worthy follow-up. It also adds new characters, game modes, improvements to the training and story modes, stages, music, gives weaker characters buffs, and some characters even get additional special moves and attacks. It also has an overall just quality of life improvements in general. The plot of the game is pretty fucked up, to be honest. After defeating the latest monster of the week and apparently having a hard time of it, the other scouts begin to question Sailor Moon's leadership abilities and decide to throw a tournament amongst themselves to find out who is the strongest and therefore a leader. Yeah, I get that they're fed up with Serena's leadership, that's fair, but, and this could just be me not remembering the show, but she's the queen of the Moon Palace, right? And they're all reincarnations of these moon people. So they should just kind of respect the crown.
I don't know, man. 90s women always asking questions.
If you thought Street Fighter 2 was too busy with all their silly world warriors and hoped against hope that they just toss all those idiots away and fill it exclusively with magical girls, then do we have a surprise for you. Sailor Moon S looks fine. I mean, I don't find the graphics on hand particularly impressive. It certainly isn't ugly, but what do you expect when most of the cast share the same outfit and body builds? The backgrounds fare much better in our eyes. Like most games based off an established property, the arenas are based off areas of the show, so just selected areas of Tokyo, and some spots of the moon, and of course the space-time door, because if I remember anything about the series, is Pluto is all about that damn space-time door.
There you go.
The stages overall vary from kinda bland to nice looking. Some even have cameos from lesser cast members.
And to continue on with our meh nature of our opinions about the presentation, the music in this game is once again just okay. The game certainly has some good sounding tracks, but nothing really pops out as standout or impressive. Well, the space-time door is nice, but that's the only real meet me at the gap track in the game. Looking at Sailor Moon from afar can give off the impression that it's just some bog standard licensed Street Fighter 2 inspired cash-in based on a popular IP. And yeah, it kinda is. But much like the other games of this era, Chrono's Revenge, Breakers, and even things like Street Fighter the movie The Game is what the players can find past these seemingly derivative looks. Or in the case of Street Fighter the movie, an attempt to ape off what's popular. So you might be asking, TBC, what makes this bland as fuck looking cash-in good? Well, first we'd say, that's Mr. TBC, mind your matters. And then answer with, it's broken. Like really broken. And we're gonna try our best to explain the silliness going on here. But we highly recommend you watch some high level matches, links in the description. Because it's, well, high level. So put on your favorite color high heels because it's time to ignore some fighting game fundamentals, which could have been intentional or not. The game on the surface is very much like a Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo clone, albeit simpler with it only being a 4-button game. Light and heavy punches and kicks. There's also throws that can be done by pressing forward and the heavy button close to the opponent, as well as throw breaking that can be done by double tapping any button while being thrown, and supers in the form of desperation attacks that can be triggered at low life or when there's less than 10 seconds left on the timer. Sailor Moon S's biggest feature that was attended will have to be the earliest instances of dashing in a fighting game, both forward and back, although only a few characters actually have forward dashes, and they can all be cancelled from any attack, which I mean, that part of the mechanics has to be intentional, right? So you might be asking once again, Mr. TBC, all that's fine and good, but what makes the game so memorable enough to still be played today? And then we'll answer, what's with all the questions? What are you, a woman from the 90s? Besides, we already answered you, it's broken, listen more. Sailor Moon S is not a balanced game. Crazy amounts of chip damage, 100% combos, suffocating command throws, and looping infinite backdashes are all on the menu and prime for abuse. And while yes, it can be argued that other games might have similar wacky BS in them as well, but what makes this game stand out to those are the GAMs. Are the simple nature of the game. Get into all those cool special moves are much more forgiving in both execution and buffering than compared to other games around this time. Thus, getting to the cool broken shit is significantly easier in this game than many others, I guarantee it. Some things like the invincible backdashes that can be looped forever, that can only be done by Mini Moon mind you, still require stricter timing, but that's for this game, so it's not too far off than a couple of minutes of training mode depending on your abilities. And don't get me wrong, this game is very savage, even at our low level of playing. One mistake can shift momentum not in your favor, and the only way of getting it back is a fresh round. But what I do appreciate about this game is that despite the clear balance of it all, the game will teach you important things such as spacing, awareness, and most of all, patience. An element that seems to be sorely missing in today's fighting games with their focus on go, the core mechanics will bail you out, go. So if you want to learn any lesson from two below average Sailor Moon S players, is that to sit your ass down and learn to wait your turn, because an opponent overextended could quickly land a win or a comeback.
We mentioned earlier that any normal can be cancelled until a forward backdash, but that also extends to special moves and desperation attacks. And while it's stupid, the fighting game logic tracks, you're canceling from attacks. But what if we told you that this also includes block stun? Yeah, block stun can be cancelled into special dashes and desperation moves as well, so the game just has free guard canceling. And I'll fight anyone on the street to try to prove that Guilty Gear came up with that angling first. Guard cancels cannot be done before 9 frames of block stun have already occurred, with the actual cancel being triggered on the 10th frame. During that time, the game will still read your inputs in the initial 9th frame of true block stun, and performing this on the first possible frame is called the FFGC, or first frame guard cancel. While inputs in this game aren't very complex outside of the occasional desperation attack, getting the FFGC to come out consistently is close to impossible as a get-on reaction. Or that would be the case if it weren't for the 15 frame directional input buffer and the ability to buffer special actions anywhere within those 9 frames to activate the guard cancel. This allows special moves to come out in the 10th frame as soon as it's available, which allows the attack to come out in the first possible frame way more consistently. I think we're using it here. Something that we had no knowledge of and were absolutely shocked to discover upon starting the game was the fact that the game has side advantage. I mean, I really shouldn't be shocked this game did come out in '94 after all. Plus we had plenty of practice with games like MK9 and for that short time MK1. Fucking NRS. Side advantage, to simply put it, is when player 1 and 2 both have pros and cons, such as player 1 always winning throws when they both hit on the same frame, or player 2 having invincibility after a throw break. This can lead to player 1 eating shit when they break a combo in the corner. We didn't even refer to these during our playtime, so it was possible to play without even knowing this. Since the roster is so small, let's take a quick look at what each scout can do.
Moon is your standard protagonist, which means she has a Pro-Tags moveset, which in this case includes 2 solid fireballs, a flash kick in the form of a high-pitched girl scream, 2 good throws, and a solid collection of normals, meaning Moon has an answer for most situations. Her games revolves around knocking down the opponent and laying down Moon Spiral Heart Attack. That has to be done from a backdash. Remember, they put you airborne, and create nasty set play situations. I might feel bad for the other girls gunning for her position, but Moon has more than enough tools to slap some upstart bitches up.
Sporting a very good projectile, throws, and a strong combo ender that leads to 50%, Mars is a very solid all-arounder who can switch up her game from rushdown to zone in very easily depending on the matchup. All these pros come at a cost, however, as she has no true defensive options and a non-existent high-low game, meaning she can't open opponents up without using her throws and mind games.
Strutting, right out of the house Bell mod is Venus. If you like fast DPs, big buttons, some of those including disjoints, MK style upball that is equally a fun combo and pressure tool, and one of the best and abusable throws in her close heavy punch, that's good for completely different reasons than I thought it was in the first place, then she's your pick. She does have a pretty crappy projectile that's not upball, and she is very, very slow. but looking past that, she's a very cool character.
If you're looking for the, oh, but she does low damage though character, Mercury is your choice. Other than damage and her defensive options, this girl has it all. Fast walk speed, buttons, a sweep that is particularly disrespectful, wall jumps, good jumper art, good cross-ups, a sonic boom, a portable DP, and a DDT. If you need someone ran through, just dial this girl's name up.
Absolute best girl Jupiter is a bit of an oddball. See, she's a mix between a zoner and a grappler, possessing an amazingly good projectile that does more chip damage than it does on hit, and as well as another good fireball on top of that. And the strongest hell command grab makes her my favorite character in the game. And the slow movement speed, some stinker normals, and combos that aren't exactly intuitive to set up won't stop me from accepting her for all that she is.
Does having a fireball and a DP make a character a show though? In Neptune's case, no, because her fireball is dog water. What she do have is very long range buttons that can bully opponents and a very strong DP that can easily counter overextending offense with a guard cancel. She's okay, very solid.
Staff characters are always cool, unless your name is Gabbit, and Pluto has a staff so she's cool by default. It also helps that she's runner up for best girl. Super big buttons are on the menu here, and that's all that's on the menu. At least for me, I'm not very good with it.
She's unconventional to say the least. She doesn't have a good fireball, any good reach or good combos, but she does have a double jump, and a dive kick that can be used to create hard to see 50-50s and cross-ups. And if you don't feel like interacting with your opponent, you can just spam her backdash that cancels into herself to make yourself invincible. You know, for fun. Sailor Moon-esque mechanics, when taking the whole thing in, feel like the developers took a bunch of pizza boxes and dead rats and placed them in the middle of an abandoned building and waited till they fused as one, making this game. Oh, I shouldn't be, the game will utter, but then they end up selling it anyway. That's not a knock at the game or anything. After playing a huge amount of matches, we can definitely see the appeal and why it has the following that it does. It's also kind of a cozy game to play, and that could be the combination of retro graphics and sounds paired with the ease of use that the game offers. I might even say it might be the funnest game that we covered on a RUNBACK so far. Initially, we assumed the game was just going to be a standard tournament-style NES fighter, featuring Sailor Moon characters. But we were shocked to find out how fun Sailor Moon-esque can really be, and now we get it. Whether it was unintentional or not, there were just the right amount of head-assness to make the game very engaging to play, and before we knew it, we played like 100 to 200 matches. It stopped being about recording a video and became more about playing the game. Speaking of which, with Sailor Moon-esque covered, it's time to bring the first season of the RUNBACK to a close. Sorry for the delay between the first 3 and the back 3. We're still trying to figure things out. Believe it or not, trying to find a way to talk about fighting game mechanics without going into too much depth and scaring people is a little bit tricky. And we're still getting used to things ourselves. Don't get it twisted, we had fun making these videos and we'll try to improve the series going forward. And one day we can find a good balance between information and entertainment.
And now it's time to do something we really don't like to do in these vids, and that's to ask to like, comment, and subscribe. The reason we don't ask much is because it really shouldn't be our place to ask. That decision should be completely up to the viewer, and if our content is what you believe to be worthy enough. So you know what? Don't do it if you don't want to. Only do it if you think our content as a whole is good. We like making videos, so we're not going anywhere anytime soon. And while it'd be cool to have a large community, it'd be cooler to know that our content spoke for itself to get us there. Rather that's uncouth or egotistical, I wouldn't know. It's just something we don't like to do. With that impromptu rant out the way, we would like to thank you for watching, truly. And we'll see you next season on the RUNBACK.
With any luck, we won't need your help. But if the time comes, we'll be counting on you, Sweeper.
morning.
Well, here we are. That sounds a lot more threatening than I wanted to sound. We made it through our initial plans of our RUNBACK series with unexpected results, and we thought we should do something special while we work on more content for it. So we decided to go off-road and do something different and take a look at something that's not really a fighting game, but the closest thing there is to one, and that would be a genre relative, the beat 'em up. Now, I don't particularly care for the beat 'em up genre, at least not as much as my brother. But the concept of fighting game spin-offs that aren't really fighting games has always interested me, unless aiming to be more ambitious. Converting a fighting game into a beat 'em up should be a no-brainer in most cases, so I was never really interested in that aspect. But fighting games do get away with a lot of things other genres can't, especially in the story department. So seeing developers try to morph ideas from those games and try to fit them into genres that need at least some kind of thinking in that area, and seeing them try to make sense of their world when they bother to do so was always intriguing to me. And I can't think of a series that has more I don't give a crap about the story's energy than the Tekken games. Yeah, I'm sure someone somewhere will argue that somehow the Tekken series stories is always low-key good, and that might be true, but from my experience with the series, which I've been playing since Tekken 3 mind you, it's always ended with some guy throwing some other guy off of something, which at least happens like 4 times throughout the series. And yeah, the story occasionally ends with a fight with a disgruntled grandpa or a mega ultra chicken, but you're not telling me the Tekken team ever gave a crap about the story. And all the big budget cutscenes in the world won't change that. One of my favorite characters in the series is Heihachi Mishima, and nothing made me laugh harder than when Tekken 7 tried to make this man to some kind of sympathetic anti-hero. Heihachi fucking Mishima, the man who shot his grandson in the 3rd entry and only proceeded to do more greasy shit from there. He's essentially anime Mr. Burns, but more dangerous since he can throw hands. But I digress. Tekken outside of the tag tournament games, and of course Street Fighter Cross Tekken, doesn't really step outside for spin-offs very often, to my knowledge anyway. But there was this one game that came out in 2005 that I always wanted to get my hands on. And while my hands really aren't on it today because Namco refuses to re-release the game, at the very least I get to play it now thanks to the power of This is Team Crossbody, and this is our look at Tekken Nina Williams' Death by Degrees. Tekken's Nina Williams and Death by Degrees, or Tekken Nina Williams Death by Degrees, or just Death by Degrees, is an action-adventure beat-em-up frustration simulator developed by Namco and released in 2005. The game was a spin-off of the Tekken series and was released between Tekken 5 and Tekken Dark Resurrection. It was Namco's only major attempt at a non-fighting game release for the series. This might be the result of us still trying to learn how to walk with our fresh out the box baby YouTuber leagues, but we found nothing about the development history behind this game, and we put at least half an ass into it. We even tried following the game's producer, Yuzo Sakagami, to try to find some insight that way, only to get sidetracked when we realized he was part of the team who ported Tales of Symphonia to the PS3. And now, while not the best port, with the GameCube being the best, I wouldn't call it bad. When I continued to search, see Tales Symphonia Dawn of a New World, saw red, and immediately ended it. So, like most things in life, we had to resort to a wiki to find out anything. So, the game was originally called Nina, but eventually had its title changed to Death by Degrees as a reference to a combat system. And the creator said that
profit wasn't a main motivator to create this game, but to serve the increasing number of Nina fans. Now, I can't find the source of this quote, but it does sound like an option select that a game developer might make if their game didn't do too well. But what do I know? Whoever said that helped make Death by Degrees, and we're sitting here on our asses with a 92 sub count, which is way more than I thought we have. Thank you, by the way.
The story opens with some guy pontificating about the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle when the ship explodes, all the while some guy who looks eerily like Spike Lee is seemingly escaping from a prison facility, being chased by some kind of robot. Spike Lee runs into an ambush that is led by another guy who looks eerily like Brad Pitt, who promptly welcomes him to the family. We are then introducing Nina proper, who is currently fighting in some unsanctioned boat-based cage fighting tournament in which she proceeds to kill several of her combatants. We get a rundown from our narrator, who is named Alan, that informs us that Nina is part of a joint operation between the CIA and MI6 to infiltrate Kamiyita, a notorious criminal organization known for weapon smuggling. The plan is to gain access to the targets through a fighting tournament being held on the Amphitrite, a luxury cruise ship owned and operated by Kamiyita. And after the title splash, we rejoin Nina after enjoying a dip when she is ambushed when her waiter decides he wants to throw hands and calls his boys over to join the fun. I'm on a boat! After a bikini-clad tutorial section that turns a boring tutorial into a fantastic one, it is discovered that Nina's cover has been blown and her team failed their mission, and as their sweeper is now tasked with finishing the mission alone. She is told to find the missing agent John. During her exploration of the cruiser, she went into Alan, who was taking sniper fire. It's up to Nina to slowly climb the ladder, take out the sniper, and provide cover fire for the agent. Which ends up being a little annoying since these guys tend to blend into the background, and in our case, bugged out and turned invisible, which we had to take a death in order to reset the minigame to fix. Going deeper into the ship, Nina will encounter security lasers that she will need to pass. Tripping the lasers will activate a Gatling gun that will kill you instantly. She would need to use her newly obtained goggles in order to see and pass them safely. I guess since we're here, we might as well talk about this game's bunker save system. The game doesn't provide checkpoints, nor does it give you the ability to save anywhere, but instead, you have to find your save points by looking at the little radar in the upper right hand corner of the screen, which will increase in strength the closer you get to one of these save points. That are invisible, by the way. Playing hot and cold with something as important as saving your game is just beyond stupid. Eventually, Nina will find John's fingerprint scanner, but no John to be seen, so she continues her search for him. Finding your way into the freezer, Nina will discover John's fate and also quickly learns that she has been lured into a trap by a gunman man named Bryce, who's the pink-haired man who saved you earlier from getting shot. This fight begins with Bryce peppering you with gunfire as soon as the game fades in, so you may be taking some unnecessarily cheap shots. The fight itself is simple enough. Bryce will run around the freezer and try to get a clean line of sight. If he does, he'll fire at you. Take cover behind the hanging meat and work your way up to him. Damaging Bryce to about half his life, the battle will end with him running away to regroup with the GPS in tow. After the fight and entering the bar, Bryce will take fire at you that will force Nina to take cover behind the counter as he threatens to break the GPS if she doesn't catch up. Nina does indeed catch up, and she will notice the GPS just sitting right there in the open, which is of course another trap. Bryce will block Nina's path with a wall of swords surrounding them, and after confirming that he's a dirty zoner, round 2 begins. This is a lot like the first fight, except there is no cover to be had this time, so you will need to use your dodges and visibility frames in order to avoid the gunfire, and the timing is pretty strict. The objective here is to push him into the blades after getting close enough, which will do more damage than just kicking him, plus he'll have armor on many of his attacks. Using focus also helps in knocking him into these blades easier. Just make sure that he's standing still first. Rushing him with katanas also helps make the fight a little easier. Of course, the threat of these wall swords also goes for you too, so keep your health up, work him down slowly. The fight is more annoying than anything else. Finishing this fight puts Bryce away for good, allowing Nina to grab the GPS, and you can continue on with your mission. The victory of finally having access to the elevator will be short-lived, however, because after discovering Bryce has been killed, the power will be cut, and Nina will be forced to travel through the air ducts in order to reach the next area. After making her way back outside the boat, Nina will encounter a twitchy Alan who almost backhands her to hell. The two of them will have to talk after defeating a swarm of guards. That is, if you can see them past Alan's head blocking the camera. Then having a turn-based RPG fight with another guard. And finally, holstering and unholstering his gun while Nina does all the work. Now that they have time to talk, Alan will confirm that his trash performance during the fight was because of rust and not shitty AI, and will brief Nina on the mission further. He explains that Kamiyita are destroying their ships in order to sneak in weapons and using the recent fall of the Soviet Union as a cover to do so. The CIA and MI6 are both concerned that they're modifying these weapons for nefarious intent. After, Alan will give Nina the Stingray drone and her marching orders. He insists that she keeps a low profile and then fires his very loud, unsilenced handgun to open the ladder before separating once again. Now you have to explore the upper levels of the cruiser. Nina will have to enter the executive areas through the fish tank. Swimming in Death by Degrees will have you enter first person mode in order to navigate around. Of course, she has an air meter and everything, with running low on air slowly reducing her health afterwards. With the way that she moves and the sound that she makes, it really reminds me of another old Namco game called Treasures of the Deep. Nina really comes off like she's in a tiny submarine while underwater. I wonder if this was some kind of deep cut reference to that. The sniping does come off as a callback to Time Crisis, so maybe. Nina will soon find herself in Lana Lee's room, in which you will have to search the area in order to construct her fingerprints, which includes the use of your newly obtained Stingray. In order to complete the fingerprint, Nina will have to sneak into Lana's closet, and before she leaves will take a random outfit that just happens to be the purple catsuit she's famous for. How Nina fit that suit when she's a much bigger woman than Lana? Your guess is as good as mine. When you enter the bathroom, Nina will find another air duct that will require you to use the Stingray once again. Thanks to the Stingray, we're able to eavesdrop on a meeting with the executives, who are all dead. With Brad Pitt holding her at sword point, Brad seemed to have came into some truths and pieced together something that seemed to have dissolved this little partnership they had going on. Brad seems to want Lana to hand over something named Solidica, and when Lana refuses to cooperate with his threats, uses her womanly wiles to drop his guard and escape. Nina would now need to find a laptop and upload the information that she just recorded with the Stingray, but with the fire alarms activated, the guards will be aware of her presence. After finding her way to said laptop, Nina will be told to make it to the extract point. Nina will alert Alan that Brad, whose name is Enrique, is coming to his location. Alan is aware, stating that he wanted to take him alive. Nina makes her way off the boat. At the helipad, Enrique will be making his escape when he is forced to surrender after he's surrounded by several armed guards and Lana herself. Nina will come rushing in when she is shot by a needle that subdues her. Lana recognizes her as the one who murdered her boyfriend, Bryce. They're an item, by the by. As she begins to succumb to the effects of whatever it is, she begins to hallucinate. Said hallucination has brought Nina back to a twisted version of her past that includes zombies and a boss fight for some reason. The hook of this fight is to protect wee baby Nina while trying to deal with Lana and the horde of zombies. This whole thing reminds me of that one fight from God of War. The one where he has to hug his family to heal them while he's ripping off the heads of his clones. God, I miss how video games used to be. Anyway, the fight itself isn't hard once you realize that if the wee baby Nina takes damage, older Nina will fall over. And that can get a little annoying if you're choosing not to protect the kid. So keeping yourself in your sights while dealing with Lana and the zombies is the best move. This whole boss fight doesn't really make sense in the context of the situation going on, unless we're to believe that Nina is protecting an invisible little girl while beating the shit out of several armed guards and Lana while under the influence of whatever she was shot with, which, if true, is just flat out overpowered. Maybe this sequence should have started with just her protecting wee baby Nina from the zombies, and somehow focusing up just enough to handle Lana at the helipad. Maybe put her under some kind of health draining gimmick. I don't know, it's just weird for me the way it is. Just seems to me that they just made the scene first and didn't have anywhere to really put it. At any rate, Nina summons just enough strength to hop on the escaping chopper and passes out into another dream sequence. This time the dream is set to a similar plane crash, but this time Nina is accompanied by her father and a wee baby Anna. I know it's not supposed to be known yet, but it's Anna. They're being held at gunpoint by several mysterious men who decide to take Anna away from the rest of her family as the dream ends. Nina is next seen being tortured by a guard with a stun baton and seemingly passing out once again. But as soon as she gets the opportunity to free herself from her shackles, she greets her victims.
Morning.
No, Nina, you're saying it wrong. It's
good morning.
Nina will find herself in a penitentiary that's being ran by Enrique. After a little exploring, Nina will be contacted by Alan. He informs her that Kamiyita has collapsed, more or less due to Enrique killing all the execs other than Lana. So, with that issue solved in itself, the only remaining thing to deal with is Celicia. Luckily for them, the guy who is responsible for the organization's falling out is located in the same facility. That man's name is Isaac Hayes. I guess now former Kamiyita scientist, who was the one that leaked the video of the boat being destroyed in the opening act of the game on the internet. Nina is tasked to find him. After an encounter with a new enemy type that seemingly clashes with the environment, Nina will once again be contacted by Alan. He has sent her a map of the area and warns her of what could be potential reinforcements in the form of the Tekken Force. Anyone who's aware of Tekken's narrative will know who these guys are. Other than being the namesake of the game mode, the Tekken Force are the private army of the Mishima Zanbatsu, which means Heihachi Mishima deployed them to the area for one reason or another. Before he can continue, however, communications are severed. For a beat-em-up, Death by Degrees has a small enemy pool, which is why we haven't really talked about the guys Nina has been fighting so far. But that changes when the Tekken Force got involved. The Tekken Force are the most annoying enemy type in the game. For masters of all form of hand-to-hand combat, their most effective strategies include stupid amounts of auto armor and standing just outside the camera's view and throwing shurikens. Nina makes her way through the torture chamber. Interrogation room? Whatever. Here it turns out that Spike Lee, the man we saw running from that robot in the opening, is this Lucas Haynes guy. Once he sees Nina, Lucas instantly tries to break some kind of deal with her, but she's having none of it, and attempts to force the information about Solidica out of him. Lucas comes off as a bit of a weasel, but he's not stupid, wanting to trade the info for his release, of which the door could only be opened by Enrique's fingerprints. Nina makes her way deeper into the penitentiary in order to find him. After a crawl in the tunnel, and what's obviously the prerequisite sword level, complete with the tried and true water puzzle, the guards will overflow the water in the area to do Nina in that way, or at least try to flush her out. This will leave her with 2 minutes to reach the upper level of the swords, which the first 15 seconds of that very small window being dedicated to Nina once again slowly climbing up the ladder on some Tomb Raider the Angel of Darkness energy. This will also involve her to shimmy across a couple of pipes while timing her movements around some loose electrified wires. The first one you'll have to avoid is simple enough, but the second floor will have 2 of them, and these gave us a bit of trouble. For some reason, on this pipe in particular, Nina will randomly stop moving and will have to take damage from the wire, causing her to drop down for an instant death. At first we thought it was our controller acting up, but nope, everything was working fine. After several deaths, we noticed that it had something to do with the camera's movements. That was the first problem. The second lies once again with Nina's "I don't have anywhere really to be" speed when doing anything. The wire's hitboxes are also a little bigger in this area as well. All these things combined made for a frustrating section that we died many times on, but we eventually got past. That little set piece will have Nina ending up in the courtyard and yet again having to pass another laser security bit. Nina will have to pass through a metal detector and will have to dump all of her metal objects into a box in order to pass, which includes her suit for some reason. I thought that was made out of some kind of spandex. Claire Redfield didn't have to take her clothes off when she did a similar thing in Resident Evil Code Veronica. Anyway, after a quick section in her bikini that turns a boring section into a fantastic one, Nina will activate the lift into the courtyard and returns to re-equipped. Having finally closed in on Enrique, Nina snoops in on a conversation he's having with a voice that any fan of the series will instantly recognize. That's right, Heihachi Mishima appears in a pretty awesome cameo. Enrique is under a similar impression that Alan had, that the Tekken Force were deployed to help bolster his forces, but Heihachi shuts down that thought almost instantly, telling him that the only reason they're down there is to test their abilities, and expressing no interest in Solidica when offered. Nina then drops down to confront Enrique, and Nahaichi, after turning down the weapon Solidica, will gladly take Nina for payment for the Zanbatsu's involvement. Of course, Enrique is not planning on delivering her in one piece. This is a pretty straightforward battle. Enrique has a good amount of reach with that sword of his and will defend against most attacks being thrown at him. The key here is to wait for him to throw out an attack, then whiff punish him while he's in recovery. Getting behind him also seems to work as well. But be careful, his sword has a couple of janky hitboxes to them that makes him feel like he's from Soul Calibur or something. It's not a hard fight, just a long one if you're planning on fighting him carefully. After defeating him, Enrique will surrender to Nina, almost too easily. Turns out his plan was to distract Nina long enough to be caught off guard by another Tekken Force member, who turns out to be Nina's sister, Anna, who promptly knocks her on her ass with Enrique getting away. Nina then has a flashback returning to the plane crash once again. This time, wee baby Nina is staring at her father's corpse with a particular sinister looking wee baby Anna standing over a gun by their feet, implying that she shot him to death. Honoring her half of the deal, Nina frees Lucas from his holding cell. But before they can talk, Alan calls Nina and alerts her that he's moving underground, where Lucas' lab is also located. Turns out Solidica is some kind of gas, and the wrong group getting their hands on it can mean the end of the world. So they also head underground. After another annoying pipe shimmy moment, but this time with searchlights, in a lengthy sniping section, Nina will meet back with Lucas and they'll take the elevator to the first floor. In the meanwhile, Enrique and Anna will be hitting deeper underground as the odds of a giant robot are shown. Back with Nina and Lucas, the two of them will be locked behind a gate where Nina will need to use her Stingray drone for the final time of the campaign. The mission here is to pilot the drone and land it on 2 buttons while trying to avoid the guards. That's easier said than done. If you happen to alert the guards, they will try to shoot down the drone. At that point, it's pretty much up to luck if they manage to do so. Getting into the elevator, Alan will contact Nina, but they're stopped when various soldiers are heard yelling in an attempt at fighting off something. After escorting Lucas down the tunnel and cutting the power to the electrified gate, Lucas opens it and gets Tom Dempsey'd in the chest for not knocking first and falls through the weakened bridge into what could be his death. Nina faces off against Anna. As Lucas unwittingly demonstrated, the gimmick to this fight is to take on Anna while watching you step around the collapsing bridge. Other than that, the fight is pretty straightforward. Anna has the same abilities as you, so think of it as a match in Tekken. Except your characters are able to move like they're not in a box factory and don't need to perform an old Korean combination of buttons constantly in order to do so. This fight can end sooner if you manage to knock Anna into the pit, but this is much harder to do. After the battle, a giant robot will appear and jump on the bridge, utterly destroying it, sending both it and Anna plunging into the pit below, with Nina attempting to try to do anything to rescue her sister, but ultimately having no control of the situation. Slightly below, Lucas miraculously ends up to be alive after a bunch of loose wires stop his fall. That is until Anna bashes into him and they fall once more. Luckily for them, they fall onto some sandbags, where the robot has Lucas in his sights and begins to chase him into a series of maze-like tunnels. Lucas will contact Nina in a panic, telling her about his situation and that she'll need to enter a nearby station in order to guide him out, while staying one step ahead of the robot, which begins the most annoying puzzle in the game. I'm making this puzzle a boss fight. It clearly isn't, but the puzzle gave us such a hard time that it might as well be. The objective is to guide Lucas to the exit of the tunnel using an old map and several surveillance cameras, of which you only have access to a couple of working ones. If you manage to guide him to the exit first, it will be boarded off, and Nina will have to guide him to something that he can use to pry it open, which in this case will be a crowbar. After he grabs the crowbar, you then have to guide him back to the exit. The issue with this puzzle, at least for us, is that there's not enough information to guide him clearly. Each part of the map that he stops on will be assigned to a letter on the map, with only 4 cameras giving you the ability to actually see where he is. Each time you start the puzzle, he will spawn at a random letter, and that includes the areas that you can see him. So you'll have to guide him just by word of mouth and the map alone. The map does have pictures of cameras that are supposed to tell you the direction he is currently facing, but even with that, it comes off as a little bit random to where he'd actually go. On top of all that, you only have 30 seconds to pick a direction, because if that timer runs out, the robot will appear, damage Lucas, and force him to choose a direction randomly. This also happens if he runs into the robot while on the move. Once he reaches the exit, it turns out that Lucas didn't even need the crowbar in the first place, since all he does is smashes his way through. It just feels like a slap in the face after getting so annoyed for it for so long. Anyway, Lucas causes a mini cave-in and blocks the robot's path, preventing it from pursuing further. Look, it might not be that difficult to others, but it was for us, and I'm just going to move on because I feel myself getting heated just thinking about it. After a bit of exploring and fighting, Nina will have to enter Lucas's lab by swimming, leaving Lucas behind because he's not as good as a swimmer, having to open the door once she reaches the other side. Once inside the lab, Lucas will explain to Nina that the legends of the Bermuda Triangle are due to bubbles, or to be more exact, methane hydrate, that lies in the bottom of the ocean in a harmless crystallized form. Once this crystallized state is heated to appropriate levels, it'll take a form of a gas and rapidly rises to the surface that carries a magnetic charge. This charge throwing off ship navigations while forcing the boat to sink to the bottom of the ocean. Look, there's a lot of Metal Gear Solid style ass-pull science involved in this scene, and I really don't feel like breaking all that down. So here's a simplified version of everything. Methane hydrate crystals lies at the bottom of the ocean and is harmless unless you heat it to an appropriate degree, at which it would turn to a gas. Kamiyuta wanted to control this phenomenon and planned to use silica, that's the satellite, not a gas like I said for whatever reason, to heat up the methane all at once at a global scale, vaporizing the ocean, which will result in a mixture of the two gases destroying the ozone layer itself. That's about the long and short of it. With all that exposition out of the way, Nina will have to put on a dive suit in order to enter deeper into the lab that's been sealed off by gas, and after mixing several chemicals together and running it through the fire extinguisher to neutralize said gas, go to collect Lucas. But when she goes to call him for an update, there's no response. Once Nina returns, she witnesses Lucas entering a nearby room. Nina follows him and soon finds a hallway of dead soldiers made up of both Enrique's and Tekken Force. Nina will soon find Lucas and Enrique, who is holding him at gunpoint. Enrique seems to be looking for the robot, which just so happens to be right behind us. Oh, by the by, the name of this robot is just J-Bot. This is a mostly easy and short fight that's made a little annoying because of the camera angle. Just beat on it for a while. If you save up enough firearms at this point, that'll make the fight so much more faster. Reducing the J-Bot's life by half will have Alan show up to start up some kind of radioactive machine that you'll have to finish the remaining of the J-Bot's health in order to use. Continuing on, Nina and Alan will catch up with Enrique and Lucas as he forces Lucas to activate silica to heat up the methane hydrate. They are too late, and before anyone can do anything else, the J-Bot reappears to knock Enrique into view of Nina, who's ready to square up. The J-Bot seems to be ready to attack the both of them, which urges Enrique to offer Nina a chance to team up in order to take down the robot. But once again, Nina is having none of it and confronts Enrique once more. This time, Enrique will pull out two daggers that will give him additional attacks that include a new projectile. Unlike the first fight, this one is a lot more of a brawl as he will be less defensive like he was the first time. To add on to things, the J-Bot will be rolling around trying to attack you both, although this will stop halfway throughout the fight. Once that's finished, Enrique will finally be dealt with, and while trying to flee the scene, Lucas will run into a returning Lana, which also results in him being dealt with as well. Nina will meet up with Alan as they look at Lucas's corpse, who was strung up as some kind of message. As Nina grabs Lucas's pocket watch, Alan tells her that they're heading back to the Amphitrite. Man, I thought I was done with that word. While on their way back to the ship, they are shot down and Nina is forced to bail out of the burning copter, managing to break her way into a nearby window. Back aboard the Amphitrite, Nina will be confronted with robotic fighters. This is when the game is at its most Resident Evil. If your version of RE includes fighting annoying robots in extremely cramped rooms, while the camera has a good old-fashioned spaz out. Returning to the Amphitrite will involve a whole lot of new concepts the game has never told you about, like shape-shifting keys and having to recollect items after using them initially. This whole return really feels like a necessary pad, because what all this amounts to is a bunch of back and forth running nonsense and the game being intentionally vague all of a sudden. It absolutely turns into a completely different game here. After a bunch of bullshit, Nina will manage to work her way to the lower decks, where it's revealed that they're making cyborgs. You think? What do you think we've been fighting this whole time? By the by, since these cyborgs were introduced, we never fought them in a fair combat environment. It's always in super small areas where they can huddle up against the camera and push you all around the map while hitting you off the ground and shit. So I guess this is our first official YouTuber apology to the Tekken Force. Sorry Tekken Force. you guys aren't the most annoying enemy types in the game. And if you say that I didn't say sorry, I'm going to be forced to take legal act. Look, I know I've been complaining about this final area. Oh right, this is pretty much the final level. And I thought final areas were supposed to challenge your knowledge on the core mechanics of the game, not showing the player every flaw of the game at one place. And that's what this feels like, a montage of the most annoying moments in Death by Degrees. There's a lot that happens here, like 3 fights against different J-bots, but I really want to get to the next story bit, and this place really drags after a while. After a bunch more bullshit, we finally make it to Lana's room, where she has a wake with Bryce's corpse covered in roses lying in her bed. And when Nina goes to grab the briefcase, she is once again attacked and poisoned by Lana and hallucinates again. Nina enters her nightmare again, and we technically learn nothing new. Nina's father is shot by some unrevealed third party in the conflict. It's Anna, and the boss fight with Lana begins. I'm beginning to suspect that this game is reusing assets in a bid to stall. For what reason? I don't know. This is the exact same fight from the beginning of the game, protecting wee baby Nina from zombies, and this time you'll be protecting wee baby Anna as well. Lana is a bit more aggressive here, but it's still pretty much an easy fight. Afterwards, in an admittedly pretty awesome twist, Alan turns out to be this Edgar Grant person, the missing Kamiyita exact, only mentioned once in the actual story. He turns out to be a sweeper just like Nina, with his mission being to cover everything up and leave Nina alive as a witness to his death. When Lana is surprised by his appearance, he fires several bullets into her and prepares to do the same for Nina. Before doing so, he laments that this was a part of the plan, but since everything with the shit, that turned Nina into a loose end. While Edgar is busy talking to Nina, this buys Lana enough time to shockingly recover, grab one of Bryce's guns, and fires into Edgar in turn, killing him. Or did she? More on that in a little bit. Nina then follows a severely injured Lana into a command center where she begins Solidica's countdown. Lana proves that she's not done diving into her bag of extremely convenient ways to get Lana poisoned, so she fills the room with the stuff and faces her once more. Again, we're thrown into another nightmare scenario. Nina faces Lana. Luckily, there's no one to protect this time, but don't worry, there are plenty of Enrique and Bryce zombies to fight, as well as a new tackling enemy type. Other than that, it's the exact same fight as before. She might be disappearing more often, but she'll knock that off once you knock out half her life. Creepy Lana finally goes down, and Nina makes her way to Solidica's controls and uses Lucas's pocket watch as a device to trigger the satellite's self-destruction, saving the world. And in typical Resident Evil game fashion, the ship's very own self-destruct mode triggers for unknown reasons, and Nina will have to fight her way off of it. Before she actually does so, however, Lana utters her last words saying, "It's him." That catches Nina off for a little bit. So I actually have a theory about this. My theory is that Edgar somehow survived his gunshot wound as well, triggered the self-destruct function of the ship, and somehow escaped. No one else could have possibly done it as far as I know. I was curious and I took a look at the wiki for the game, and yeah, it has the same line of thinking. Adding on to that, apparently if you return to Lana's room after the fight, Edgar's body would be gone and there would be a blood trail leading to a missing submarine. So maybe. Going back on track, the path of which will be absolutely littered with cyborgs, and I mean littered. Just like the rest of the revisit to the Amphitrite, this part is just filled with bullshit, and this time of the gotcha variety, with cyborgs literally somersaulting at you as soon as the game fully fades in. Remember, you're on a timer, which means that you'll have to run, which means the camera will change and you'll end up getting confused while getting gangbanged by a bunch of robots who will stun like you to death. If you can get a lucky enough run going, you can manage to reach the escape pod. During her escape, a helicopter will come in to assist, just before Nina can reach the rope, and at times Dempsey's Nina in the tits and goes her into a fight on top of the burning cruiser. This is the final boss of the game, and this time Anna is much more aggressive and will block constantly. The arena will have burning barrels that'll knock both of you down, as well as exploding ones. The edge of the boat is also a hazard that you can fall off of, but much like the past fight with Anna on the bridge, she can also fall off once again, but it's rare. The only way to deal consistent damage to her is to wait for whiff punishes and wiggle her down that way, or the use of critical strikes. I also hope you're comfortable with blocking as well, because you can take small pot shots on her that way too. That's about it. There's no real way of cheesing her other than knocking her off the boat. Her health pool is also super large, so selling it in for a long one is recommended. This was exactly the boss fight that wasn't needed after all the crap this section of the game put us through. After having your health and resources wear down just to get to this point, it almost feels next to impossible to beat Ana if you're going into it unprepared. And if this is your first time, it will be, obviously. And that's a pain, yeah, but it would have been a lot more tolerable if the game would have provided you with a checkpoint or at least a save before the encounter. But we need to remember that the last stretch of this game suddenly wants to be a Resident Evil, so that means that if you die, that's a chunk of progression lost, something the game has never done to this point because it will usually provide you with a save point before each boss. Soloing from a save point will have you start from the bathroom where you have to fight Lana both times. But wait, there's a save point after Lana Fight 1, in the control room, but since the save system is the way it is, we completely missed it. Anyway, after going through that damn countdown session again filled with annoying cyborgs who punches might as well just be hit scan, we get another shot at taking down Ana. Mercifully, we managed to do so we finally get to talk about the end of the game now. The sisters' fight finally comes to an end when the boat actually interrupts them, blowing both women towards the edge of the ship. Nina manages to stop herself enough to grab a hold of a fallen Ana, and while she's on the "so about that kicking you away from the rescue copter" face, Nina has a flashback. Returning to everyone's favorite crash site, we get a good life lesson in the fact that if you hold up a gun to a parent's head and then proceed to threaten their children, they might just spring into action in an attempt to protect them. And Mr. William proves just that, going on the offensive and taking out several men before the numbers eventually gets to him and he's knocked down. Now struggling with one of the men and being overpowered, he urges his daughter to take the gun, but wee baby Nina is frozen with fear, being unable to move. As another guard beside her grabs that gun and aims towards Father Williams, shots are fired that indeed kill the remaining two men, but also kills their father. Wee baby Ana then approaches the still frightened wee baby Nina and comforts her. Back in real time, Ana manages to tighten her grip as Nina pulls her up, but a blast sends both of them falling off the boat. Ana is able to recover and seeing the returning rescue chopper, jumps off the falling platform and is able to grab onto the hanging rope with Nina still in hand, somehow. Ana gives Nina a similar warm look that she gave during the flashback, as several ships can be seen on the horizon arriving on the scene. Ana tells Nina that they're finally even before dropping her in the ocean to be picked up, and Nina chuckles and gives a little smirk as she flies off into the distance. With her earlier quote from Alan, Edgar repeated, "Death by degrees comes to a close." I'll just fire off some random thoughts I had about the story mode now that it's finished. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much going in, but the plot of Death by Degrees is actually pretty good and fun to experience. It's very simple, although at times I did get confused on what Salacia actually was, but I'm gonna strike that as me not paying attention and not a fault of the game. The cast of characters was shockingly small, and I was put off guard with how much I actually liked them, even though they were kinda one-note and cookie cut. I would say that my favorite characters outside of Nina, because I already liked her, will have to be Lucas and Enrique. I ended up enjoying the short-lived relationship Nina and Lucas had, despite it just being cool guy and nerd. It was nice to see the little interactions Nina had with him. Enrique's entire character can just be boiled down to a cool criminal guy with an accent, and I think I largely liked that about him because he might as well be a part of the Tekken main roster already. He certainly has the look. Maybe if this game was more successful. The, I guess, double twist with Alan being Edgar isn't really surprising, but I let my guard down long enough for it to work on some level. He is only mentioned once by name in the whole story if I remember correctly. What really shocked me was Lana surviving and just seemingly ending Edgar instantly with what was clearly plot armor, because that girl was shot 4 times in the chest directly and still ran away, started Solidica, and had a whole boss fight before finally succumbing to her injuries. And even then she still had shit to talk on her way out. We definitely needed a little more time with her. The potential discovery that Edgar could have been the one to start the Ampharite's self-destruction was also a cool bit of the story too. The game's boss fights are usually a 1v1 affair that features some kind of environmental or character gimmick, like Bryce firing his pistols more than throwing punches, or the weekend bridge fight with Ana. There's about 9 or so bosses, and I don't think in that time we've ever learned how to deal with their armor or block other than just throwing ourselves at them or spamming something like Critical Strike. Not to mention Nina doesn't have anything to break guard but throws that most bosses are immune to, or the aforementioned Critical Strike spam. Would have been nice if the combat system didn't feel so random when it came to actually attacking them. This was said already, and it will probably be said a couple more times for the remainder of the video, but it's crazy how this game just turns into Resident Evil by the end of the story. I'm not even saying it's a bad thing because it's strange in a very interesting way. When the story would really take the focus away from Nina and we follow one of its original characters for a little bit, I tend to forget that it's even a Tekken spin-off game, especially for how gory it is at times, once again throwing me off, considering that the source material is always rated T for teen. I would like to reiterate that the revisit to the Amphitrite all the way to the final confrontation with Anna was extremely painful from a gameplay perspective. All of it. I have nothing nice to say. I wish you guys would have felt the way we felt when we entered this final area. The entire thing felt like busy work to artificially squeeze some more playtime out of the game, and feeling super not play tested doesn't help. The whole ordeal was extremely cheap, bloated, and poorly balanced. This area alone warps my entire perspective of this game single-handedly, but I'll try to keep a cool head when figuring out how we feel about this game as a whole. Pushing all that aside, if we're just talking shop about the story, then I think it's good. I would even call it one of the better Tekken stories. I don't get why it needs to be non-canonical to the main series. It takes place a fair amount of time before the first game, with everyone involved in this incident other than Nina and Anna being dead, and Nahaichi largely felt like he didn't care less about anything that was going on except with the Tekken Force. So couldn't it easily fit into the main series? I mean, if I'm not missing anything too important that's strange other than Anna working for the Zanbatsu. I don't know. Ultimately, I feel that it's wasted potential that can help elevate both Williams sisters. They have some callbacks here and there to Death by Degrees, and you could probably bring some characters in. Well, there's only one surviving character as far as we know, but you get my point. But I guess for that series, if you're not a Mishima, then you get typical BS hamster wheel storytelling. Although Tekken 8 does bring some things over from Death by Degrees, Nina's weapon usage, and she does a critical strike for her super, so maybe it's not completely forgotten down there. Tekken 5, from my recollection, was a very good looking game for its time, and I sadly can't feel the same about Death by Degrees, which might not be a totally fair comparison, seeing that one's a fighting game and the other is tasked with being a much bigger action adventure game. It's not a horrid looking game or anything, but it just looks really subpar. Well, the character models are good looking and very detailed, probably the best looking aspect of the game, but they are all very stiffly animated with the exception of Nina's jiggle physics. The team made sure those animated just fine. I'm not complaining, just pointing it out. While on the subject of boobs, a detail I like that they added is that over the course of a mission, Nina will be wearing a lot of different outfits, and throughout those missions, Nina's costume will show battle damage, usually after a boss fight. I think it's very cool how they show how the various assignments that Nina goes on have their wear and tear on her, and that she isn't just breezing past them easily. And while I can say that I don't care for how certain people cry about how women are portrayed in media, because I don't buy into the narrative that they're underrepresented, because they aren't, and that's a load of crap. I can say that I do respect that the game barely, if ever, tries to over-sexualize Nina in any way, despite a lot of the battle damage variants of these costumes might as well have a whole breast or butt cheek out. And it's not because of woman pride or anything. I just think them not really drawing attention to it keeps Nina looking professional and makes the men that she surrounds herself with not look like sex-hungry teenagers, which at the end of the day assists in selling the story a little bit more. So, yeah. Is it TNA? Yeah. But it was also 2005, and girls didn't play games in 2005 according to the world. Girls should have played more games. Then maybe you guys would have got a spin-off. About what? I don't know. Maybe Haichi and the Thong. The texture work on the environments are once again subpar. I would go as far as to say that it's really bad. I would go further to say that it actually gets in the way of gameplay from time to time, with lots of samey looking areas and even repeated rooms. This is especially harmful in the prison section of the game, where the endless halls of washed out gray and brown will literally have you running in circles, missing important rooms because you thought you've been there already, the moment where you're crawling through the tunnels, and God, that underwater section really are some of the most irritating parts of the game. Tekken, up until the 7th entry for the most part, usually have some banger soundtracks, so it's mind-boggling how Death by Degrees is so mediocre. There's a couple of good tracks in the game, but most of the music in the game consists of pretty generic butt rock riffs, and some of them really get droning after some time, especially in the prison section.
Knock off that racket or I'll call the cops!
His teacher says he's supposed to practice.
I am his teacher!
You won't remember them because they're particularly good, but because it's used for so long as you're wandering around. The game is also filled with a ton of generic sound effects that I swear I heard in other games before. But most disappointing of all are the combat sounds, that once again is filled with almost stock noises. Why didn't they use sounds from the Tekken games? That would have helped out the game massively. The voice acting I thought was solid. With the exception of Lucas, who had some super strange line reads at times, there was nothing really to complain about. This was the first time Mary Elizabeth McGuinn portrayed Nina Williams, and she does a good enough job to voice the character to this day. So that's neat. Death by Degrees is a hybrid between combat, Resident Evil style puzzles, exploration, and several minigames. If all that sounds like a strange mix for what's supposed to be a simple beat 'em up, well, it is, but that mostly depends on your take of the game as a whole. The game will ask you to fight your way out of an enemy ambush at one moment, and then will slow to a crawl the next while searching for various keys or thumbprints with little to no combat outside of the occasional respawning guard, and then we'll jump to a sniper section soon after that. But let's look at each of these things individually and then cover what modes the game has to offer. During these sections, players will guide Nina throughout a relatively big map in order to complete several objectives as you do. Most of the objectives are mostly just to get to point A to point B, which will be simple enough as it wasn't for the game's very confusing map design, which is never really clear about which route you should take next. Luckily, the game does provide a map for each area, and if it doesn't, it will usually give you one early on. Unluckily, you'll have to be referring to this map, and that requires a 2 to 3 second loading screen each time it's used, which really jams up the pacing of the game. Paired with Nina's ridiculously slow running speed, loading times between doorways, actually pausing the game itself, the trial and error moments and respawning enemies, these sections really begin to drag. Much like Metal Gear security system, which requires key cards, the game will have you collect fingerprints using a print scanner, and each print has its own security level associated with it. You'll then be using these prints to unlock various doors throughout the game. Each door is unlocked by Nina holding out the scanner, unlocking the door, waiting for the text box and hitting X, and then watching her slowly walk through the door every time, which once again slows down the game. Watching Nina's doing stuff slowly makes up a lot of this game, and this won't be the last time you hear this issue. There's a good amount of puzzle solving in Death by Degrees, and that actually took us by surprise. Not because they were tough or anything, I think it was because we kept getting thrown off by the game's genre blending nature. The puzzles aren't ones you'll find in usual beat 'em ups, but more in an action adventure or survival horror game, which this game give off big vibes of that already. We already mentioned that the game apes a lot of that genre, but there are several moments when the game feels like a legit survival horror, which is odd because it's based off Tekken of all things. But I'm getting off topic. The puzzles in the game aren't really that difficult by any means, but they are more involved than you first might think, and they show up fairly often in the second half of the game after really not appearing in the beginning, which favored the thumbprint hunting more. These challenges are the exact kind of affairs you see in a Resident Evil game, using the right combination of levers to open the right doors, and that annoying tunnel puzzle that we mentioned in the story section. These really shouldn't get on your nerves once you're used to the game's pacing, which, if you made it this far, you should be. The camera system is by far the worst aspect of the game. The game sports two camera styles, isometric and third-person free mode that are toggleable at any time, and neither helps with the game's issues. When it comes to exploration, the camera will actively withhold information by keeping it ever so slightly off screen so you can just unknowingly run by it when you're trying to figure out what to do next. There were several times when we were running for minutes
in minutes trying to figure out what we had to do just to find out that the camera had to be changed. It's annoying, and it happens often. So let's put a pin in the camera issues for now, because exploration isn't the only thing it hurts, which leads us to the combat. The game gets its cool namesake from the analog stick-based fighting system that gives Nina the ability to take on any enemy from any given angle just by flicking the right stick in that direction. This combat system isn't as unique as you might think, and no, I'm not referring to the Batman Arkham games, but 2004's Jet Li Rise to Honor and 2001's Star Wars Obi-Wan. And while those two games do suffer from their own control issues, both control much better than this. Bear with me while I go in depth a bit. First, I should explain the controls themselves. Flicking the stick towards an opponent will have her attack in that direction. Keep flicking the stick for her to complete a string of attacks. When an opponent attacks you, before it connects, you can flick the stick in that direction to deflect it. Double tapping the left stick will have Nina do an evasive flip that does have invincibility frames. When doing this near an enemy, she will somersault over them to attack from behind. R1 is the grab button. Flicking the right stick in a certain direction will throw the enemy in that direction. These throws can be followed up for more damage. L1 while held will augment how right stick attacks to do more damage. This is also how you do her more iconic attacks from the series. Holding L2 and flicking the right stick towards the enemy will have Nina enter critical strike mode, where you can see an x-ray of your target and will be able to break bones or rupture organs for burst damage. Doing this will consume focus meter, however. Being a high-level agent that is trained on all forms of killing, of course Nina has the ability to use weapons of both the range and melee variety that are used by selecting them with the D-pad, holding L1, and flicking the right stick. There's a good selection of weapons, from hand, machine, shot, and laser guns, to knives, samurai sword, and tonfas. Weapons don't really give you an overwhelming edge over enemies other than having a digit on the hitbox and a fireball, so the basic active kicks the body in the face till they die doesn't really go out of style. So in that regard, I suppose the weapons are well balanced. One of the weapons actually give Nina her misspit attack from the main attacking games. As you fight enemies and rack up combos, you'll earn skill points. The longer the combo, the more skill points accumulated. These can be spent at the skill shop in the pause menu for additional attack combinations, stronger chain throws, and weapon abilities, and other cool things as Nina level up with the cat being 17. Her health and focus meter also increases as she levels. The game doesn't really force you to interact with any of these elements, being able to defeat anyone at any time, and being able to unlock what you want freely, as long as you have the appropriate level and skill points. In my opinion, this is really well designed. The issue with the combat system lies in its sluggish execution. It feels all so imprecise, which can lead to some seriously frustrating situations. While in the act of throwing limbs around, Nina doesn't do what other characters typically does in this control style, canceling her attacks to the next action so she can react to the enemy throwing attacks behind her. There's a small delay before she actually addresses any threat that's not immediately in front of her. By the time she starts to commit to another attack, she's bunked in the head for her troubles. Dodging also has this issue of her going into a very small but very noticeable recovery frames after use. Once again, it leaves her open to another bonking. Outside of flicking the attacking stick to deal with mobs, Nina has a selection of special tap attacks that can be brought from the skill shop throughout the game if you're feeling a bit spicy. But pulling off some of these moves require you to input some funky and unintuitive joystick and shoulder button combinations that are more annoying than fun. There are some super ones that can see immediate use, but most of the time you'll just be mashing away at the stick to deal with the enemies because it's just easier to do. And that's unfortunate because she does have some cool moves behind these asinine commands, such as useful launchers like her geyser cannon. A special shout out to blocking that once again can be done by flicking the attacking stick in the direction where attack is being thrown. This can involve some strict timing, which is pretty difficult when multiple enemies are attacking you at once, which happens a lot in this game due to the combat system. Another special shout out to the evasive wall jumps Nina can perform by dodging into the wall. It can be janky, but it works. The biggest issue with the combat in Death by Degrees is once again the camera, which will be just as big as a roadblock as the enemies. While you find yourself being assaulted from all sides, being pushed in different directions. This means you'll eventually end up in a situation where the Fitz character needs to flip itself to the next shot, and this destroys the entire flow of the fight. Viewing Nina from a different perspective will suddenly change your inputs, and you'll start freaking out and kicking the air because your controls are suddenly flipped on his head, which of course will lead to a curb stomp as you try to reorientate yourself. The camera will lead to fun moments such as hiding firearm wielding enemies just outside of your sight, taking pop shots at you from off screen while you're trying to deal with who's in front of you, which could lead to hit stun, which could lead to the enemies in front of you confirming their hits and push you into annoying juggle situations. The game showers you on health, but this seemed like a sloppy band-aid for the poor camera. The game does have stealth to a degree, but it just amounts to Nina clomping around loudly and her victims being too dumb to hear them breaking her necks.
Wait, whoa, clomp? Yes, Lana, clomp, meaning... I know what clomp means!
Your clomping ass ought to know.
It's not encouraged, but it does skip combat sections every now and then. These guys make fighting games, so it's strange that the combat mechanics are so half-baked and poorly thought out. It's extra strange when you remember that Tekken also features an in-game beat-em-up minigame called Tekken Force, or Devil Within, or whatever the hell it was called in Tekken 6 it was theirs in the main games. And yeah, those aren't exactly beat-em-up royalty or anything, but they function. Maybe if they weren't too busy making fucking 100 honeycomb puzzles. These will show up at certain points in the story in an attempt to add some variety to the game, and is usually consistent of 4 games. Sniping is self-explanatory. Take aim, shoot the guys while completing the objective, which is usually just shooting guys. Nothing really to say about it. The aim is a little twitchy, but aside from that, it gets the job done. From time to time, you will be asked to control the Stingray drone to explore areas Nina cannot. Most of the time though, it would be some type of maze or small obstacle course. The drone has its own health bar and a battery meter that serves as a timer, and when depleted to 0 will trigger a game over. If this happens, the campaign will actually show you some kindness and give you an actual checkpoint at the beginning of said section, proving that the usual dumbass peekaboo save system is indeed bullshit. This might be the best controlling minigame out the bunch, or at least the one we had the most fun with. I'm not sure if the swimming sections count as a minigame, but they do take you away from the main form of gameplay to do something completely different, so I'll place it here anyway. Aside from feeling like Treasures of the Deep like stated earlier, there's not much to talk about. The only thing you actually do while swimming is pick things up. There aren't puzzles, and these sections don't really come up that much anyway. There's a point in the penitentiary map where there's a pretty lengthy swimming challenge. You'll have to swim through super foggy water in a maze-like area that's more annoying than fun. I don't know if the devs did this intentionally, or is it about the PS2 love affair with using motion blur, but the answer is, it was painful. Lastly, there's the honeycomb puzzles, where you will be asked to line up these numbers in numerical order within the turn limit. These will usually show up when the game wants to hide some type of secret from the player, but are usually in cache boxes that access the game's treasure chests. The sniping, Stingray drone, and honeycomb minigames are all playable from the main menu after completing the game. We didn't bother with them because outside of the occasional drone section, these minigames aren't anything to write home about, and we didn't really feel compelled to replay them. Speaking of game modes, there are 2 more minigames we need to cover. Challenge mode will have you play Nina, beating up enemies while trying to complete certain conditions, raising from predetermined combo numbers, or defeating a certain number of enemies. It's fine. It's just mindless beeswax if you want more out of the game. There's one more mode we need to cover that has some actual plot relevance though. You'll be playing Anna Williams in this minigame to find out what happened to Nina after her escape from the Solitaria Penitentiary. The game objective is to collect data cards as you make your way to the pair alive. There's a couple of changes from the main game to this, such as not being able to save, with the stupid save radar being used to assist Anna in locating the data cards, and Anna being unable to use firearms but still free to use melee weapons. She also has every hand-to-hand combat skill unlocked from the start. It's fairly challenging and replayable. This is the kind of content that would definitely be hung over our heads for $10 to $15 DLC nowadays. So it's nice to reminisce and head back to a simpler time when these kind of things were unlocked and games had actual modes to speak of. How you feel about the unfocused gameplay will be up to the person playing it. As for us, we enjoyed the game enough to at least find something to like about it, despite the admittedly many flaws the game has, but more on that later. So if there's one thing Death by Degrees is actually good at, is content. The campaign sits at a solid 8 to 10 hours with different difficulty levels, several different minigames that are replayable on their own, if you want, and 2 unique modes that offer different takes on the gameplay itself. So yeah, a nice amount of things to do that can extend the game by a significant amount of time. I think this game would be so much cooler if they added something like Resident Evil Mercenaries, where players could pick from Nina, Anna, Alan, or the various boss characters as they fight their way through repurposed maps, completing objectives and taking on mobs of enemies or whatnot. I mean, why not? The game is already so much like Resident Evil anyway. I wonder how many people will make it up to this point of the video. Not much, I'm sure, but oh well. That's the way this kind of thing goes. But for the 3% of you that do, be in mention, type in the words 10 trillion tons of mayhem in the comment section. Why? So we'll know who the real goons are. Shit. I don't think I could use the word goons no more. Oh well.
Nathaniel G writes, I consider myself a fan of tactical espionage. I've played through all of the PlayStation Metal Gears, the games I consider to be the top of the genre, several times. I enjoyed Nina Williams' character in Tekken and the idea of a female lead. Ugh. I should have just avoided it. Not only are the controls poor, everything that has to do with the right analog stick, but the camera changes from you being able to control it to not, depending on where you are. To run, you need to hold the R2 button, but this also switches to an over-the-head view. As you enter a different section, the camera may switch back to a fixed or vice versa. How are you supposed to be able to sneak up on people if you can't even control the character well? I already want to throw it away. Horrible, horrible game.
I think starting your review with how you played through all the Metal Gear games prior to picking up Death by Degrees is a little bit of an onion to flex. Sure, the game has stealth in it, and it was indeed shallow, but I think this is one of the moments where the team who made the game had some gameplay self-awareness and never made it the focus. I don't think it ever came up during the opening tutorial, and I'm positive it is never forced upon the player at any time during gameplay. It's seriously never acknowledged. The game does display throwing to the player at the start of the first level, but never anything about stealth. It's clear they build on the idea somewhere during development. The element of the game just resulted into something that you can do if you're there. Also, tactical espionage isn't a game genre, they're called stealth games. I think you know that, you're just trying to sound smarter. At least we can agree that choosing Nina was the best move for the game. Her profession as an assassin is just vague enough to build some type of story around. I can't think of a single other character on the Tekken 5 roster that's good enough for a whole spinoff. Unless they do Eddie Gordo's Dance Dance Revolution or something. The rest of Nathaniel's grievances fall in with the game's camera, and that's fair criticism. A little dramatic, but fair. We think the camera stands as the worst aspect about the game as well, and I was with him up until his last sentence, which just confirms he was playing the wrong game. Look, this game has control issues, but it's far from broken or unplayable. This guy was just trying to play it like it was Metal Gear Solid and sneak everywhere, something you can instantly tell that wasn't in the cards when the first thing the game teaches you is about combat. Besides, it's not like the game is called Tactical Espionage, Tekken's Nina Williams, and Death by Degrees. Tekken's Nina Williams and Death by Degrees wants to wear a lot of hats and appeal to a lot of different people all at the same time. But all of those different elements the dev teams throw in just end up having the game contradict itself at every possible turn and pulling it in a ton of unfocused directions. Much like its own multi-directional combat system, leaving the game feeling unpolished but not broken. If the team would have just scaled back and focused on one or even two of these concepts, the game might have ended up a lot different, because there are good ideas here, and I respect the effort to elevate Tekken to something more, because I don't think there's anything lazy, it's just a bit overly ambitious. Like the dev team just wanted to make the coolest game possible and just mashed a bunch of ideas they like from other games to accomplish that. And maybe it's more cynical than that. Maybe they just bucked a bunch of popular trends and tried to smash them into one game. But I don't want to think of it like that, because as people who just started a YouTube channel, we kind of relate in that way, and rather look at it from a more sympathetic angle. Are we saying Death by Degrees was some easily tossed away hidden gem worth your time? No. But the game is far from the broken mess the publications made it out to be, the final level notwithstanding. The game isn't perfect, and at times that might mean some truly frustrating moments, but then the game is back to being relatively fun. It's kinda like being in the eye of a hurricane. It doesn't last long. And with that said, we can't surely bring ourselves to hate Death by Degrees. Is it good? Yes and no. But we certainly played much worse. And there are definitely more worse games on the PS2. If we had to score the game, it would be a 2.5 out of 5. If it would have focused and landed on one of the ideas and kept the rest of the issues, it would have been mediocre at best. But it aimed to be a jack of all trades and ended up being a little bad at everything. But what do you think? Are we being too nice? For those who played Death by Degrees, what is your experience and opinion of the game, and how would you score it? Leave a comment, we're generally interested in your takes. Now, with all that wrapped up, it's time to return to fighting games. We'll see you next time on the RUNBACK.